Chapter 2004. Evidence? Where would the immortals have evidence? If you wait until the evidence is conclusive before dealing with it, I'm afraid you won't even have a grave. But haven't you noticed one thing? Ever since the innate Taos began to collapse, haven't there been too many cultivators who have attained the Tao? Too easy? Just like the two of you. The number of Tao realms you have comprehended is not few. Do you know how much time your predecessors spent just to master a single innate Tao? That was at least a few thousand years to start. How did it become so easy now? Lu Xiaoyi and the bamboo didn't say anything. To be honest, among the half-immortals, the two of them were the most abnormal in comprehending Tao realms. There were so many of them that it was a bit abnormal. Of course, they were also the ones who were the most affected, especially the bamboo hat. He was very clear on how he was able to achieve omnipotence in the innate Tao. It really wasn't entirely his ability. Immortal Wu Huan knew that they were already suspicious. This was his goal. Perhaps because there were too few people, he might not be able to spread it. But at least this was a start, an attempt. He was very clear that there were many immortals who had the same thoughts as him. They were all the lower-level immortals of 4 sacred heavens. They wouldn't stand out now, but when the calamity truly befell them, they would definitely think of a way to do something. Before the era changed, the truth would be revealed to the entire cultivation world of the universe. Tao fragments spread throughout the universe. Those who are virtuous shall occupy them. Those who are fated shall obtain them. What is virtuous? What is fated? Do you think that doing a few more good deeds in your previous life is virtuous? That you are fated with the heavenly Tao? You guys are underestimating the immortals' understanding and control of the Tao. How could these Tao fragments really randomly fall into the mortal world, out of their control? The immortal elder's consciousness was somewhat agitated and angry. Although I can't explain it too thoroughly, I can responsibly say that the fragments of the great Tao that seem to be completely free actually have passive consciousnesses attached to them. They will choose, and approach those whose ideals are closest to them. The goal is self-evident. You guys can think about it yourselves. This is the most brilliant method. Even the heavenly Tao can't do anything about it. It's the same as leaving a way out for oneself after the era changes. It's just a pity that those of us who cultivate post-celestial Taos don't have Tao fragments to disperse. If you want to leave behind some memories and make a comeback, you violated the immortal Tao. Immortal Tao? Who wouldn't want to commit such a crime? Changsheng, after you've experienced it once, how could you not think of a way out for your own safety? The landlord of the mortal world even knows to dig a hole in his bedroom, just in case. It doesn't make sense for him to be so generous after becoming a great immortal and not think about the future. He spoke very vaguely, but in fact, he was hinting at the golden immortal and the golden immortal. It meant that when the innate Taos were crumbling, they had secretly attached their consciousness to the countless Tao fragments. This was not difficult on the technical level. After all, the ability of a gold immortal had completely broken through the normal range. His consciousness was so majestic that it was not difficult for him to split his thoughts into billions of thoughts. These consciousnesses were passively attached to the grand Tao fragments, and their function was to help identify the abilities and ideals of cultivators. Of course, most of them would fail. After all, cultivators that could catch the attention of golden immortals and golden immortals were truly rare. But there would definitely be cultivators with potential that satisfied their conditions. What immortal Wu Hua meant was that after the cultivator fused with the grand Tao fragment, the golden immortal's consciousness would help the cultivator comprehend the true meaning of the grand Tao, imperceptibly and silently. When the cultivator completely grasped this innate Tao, the cultivator himself was actually not too sure whether he had grasped it or not. Or was it under the intentional guidance of the golden immortal's consciousness? Why did he do this? It was very confusing. If the upper beam is not straight, the lower beam will be crooked. If the golden immortals and golden immortals did this, could you expect the true immortals and human immortals below to be obedient? That was naturally the 8 immortals showing their abilities. It was just that some did it safely and secretly, and so are limited by their abilities, just like immortal Wu Hua. He was treated as a negative example. However, Lu Xiaoyi's interest was not on this. He was very clear about the process of his understanding of the innate Tao. To be honest, he had never truly fused with a grand Tao fragment. It was not that he had foresight, but that these grand Tao fragments could communicate with him, but none of them were willing to fuse with him. He did not know which part of the process went wrong. With his talent, he should not have received such treatment. It must be because the grand Tao fragment had scruples. What scruples? What else could it be? The sword vein was a rat crossing the street that everyone wanted to beat. This also explained to a certain extent why he could understand the grand Tao fragment on his own, but could not fuse with it, because there was a force that was preventing this process. He thought it was a mystery, but in fact, the Golden Immortals were unwilling to let another monstrous freak appear in the sword vein. The more outstanding he was, the more he could not fuse with the grand Tao fragment. This was because there was a wisp of the Golden Immortals' will that no one could discover, which was the will of the former master of the Great Tao. Even if the Great Tao had collapsed, the Golden Immortals could still do this. This was something that Lu Xiaoyi had always been very curious about, but he did not expect the answer to be here. However, what he was concerned about was, Senior, what you said is a strange story of the immortal world that we will never hear. To be honest, we thought that the Great Tao had collapsed, but the Golden Immortals were still there. After all, who would be able to harm them and cause them to die? Immortal Wu Hua had come with the intention of spreading the news. The reason behind it was just that he was unable to resist and cause trouble, so he did not mind saying a few more words. You little guys, it's understandable that you don't know much about the changes in the upper realm. In fact, this is not a big secret. When the changes in the universe enter the middle and later stages, it can't be hidden from people. The innate Great Tao collapsed, and the master of the Great Tao, those Golden Immortals, naturally lost the foundation of their existence. What reason do they have to continue existing? Just like us. But the Golden Immortals are different in that the innate Great Tao will collapse and spread to the world, but the postnatal Great Tao of us ordinary immortals will not. The universe changes, the eras change. The immortal world naturally knows more than the mortal world and has countless ways to pass the tribulation. Do you think that after living for millions of years, they will die in the end? So they can do it, but we can't. The Golden Immortals can spread the innate Great Tao to the world in order to seek a form of reincarnation in the future, which is something we can't do. So I say, the truth that you little guys think may not be the truth. So now, do you still insist on your so-called justice? The few of them fell into a short silence. These secrets from the immortal world, from the mouths of real immortals, were really shocking. It was challenging the bottom line of the two half-immortals. Chapter 2005. The bamboo hat tried his best to calm himself down, because everything that immortal Wu Hua said was actually related to him. But the problem was that there were too many related things, and now he didn't know the real consequences. If he had only fused with one Great Tao fragment, he might be worried about whether he would become a tool for the Golden Immortal in the future, or even not be himself anymore. But his current problem was that he had fused with too many innate Great Taos, so he couldn't tell which Great Tao was the main one, and which was the supplement one. He kept reminding himself that he was different from others. In the process of understanding the various Tao realms, he was very clear about the source of his comprehension. He was the guardian of the heavenly Tao order, a different smoke and fire. The more dangerous the immortal's words were, the more he wanted to kill him, because this was challenging the order, and he, the bamboo hat, was the protector and inheritor of the existing order. This was his inevitable choice. On one side was the remnant soul of a has-been immortal, and on the other side were gods and Buddhas. This choice wasn't difficult. Moreover, immortal Wu Hua wasn't a symbol of justice. As an immortal who hadn't fallen yet, doing this to remind the mortal world of cultivation was worthy of respect, just like Li Wuya from the sword vein back then. But immortal Wu Hua's current actions were obviously venting his anger. venting his anger after abandoning his vested interest group. Because he was chased off the boat, the mainstream abandoned him and didn't want to play with him anymore. He was just a profit-seeking person who didn't get any benefits, so he turned around and bit back. That was all. Based on this, if they did as he said, then they would be seeking their own deaths. It would be foolish beyond compare. He was worried about the swordsman. He was worried that this guy's personality couldn't tolerate such ugliness. A mere half-immortal couldn't tolerate the immortal court. This sounded ridiculous, but the Xianyuan swordsman could do it. Their sword ancestor was a classic example. Fortunately, the swordsman wasn't stupid. Lu Xiaoyi looked very apologetic. This is only your one-sided story. We can't verify it. I'm very sorry. Even if all of this is true, we have to complete our mission. Otherwise, we won't even have the chance to verify your story in the future. Senior, you can't escape. Immortal Wu Hua was not surprised. Of course, he knew that no matter what he said, he could not change the fact that he was already a has-been. This was the crux of the problem. This old man has never thought of hiding. If I really wanted to deal with the two of you, I wouldn't even need to lift a finger. I just need to drag it out for a few more years. What can you do to me then? Immortal Wu Hua sighed in melancholy. You are suspecting whether my current existence is a good corpse or an evil corpse, right? In fact, how could the good and evil corpses represent the vastness of the ancient methods? My ancient technique originated from the Leap 8 Heavens Cauldron. It flourished when the cauldron was passed down through the cauldron to forge the fire. In the end, it also declined when the spirit was attached to the object. How could there be a distinction between good and evil? Before becoming an immortal, it was obsession. After becoming an immortal, it was kindness. After becoming an immortal, it was evil. Good until the end is evil. Evil until the awakening is good. Just like a person's life, how could there be a conclusion? The Leap 8 Heavens Cauldron let out waves of sobs. That was the awakening of Leap 8's spiritual wisdom, crying for the friend who had accompanied him for millions of years. When an immortal died, he left his body. Now, he realized that it was time for his soul to leave. This human who had been with him for millions of years, whether they were master or friend, whether they used each other or supported each other, no matter what, after millions of years, a special feeling had been cultivated. Regretfully, when it was reborn, Immortal Wu Hua was about to completely leave. He couldn't even leave behind a trace of his soul. Amidst the sobs, the Tao Realm force field began to become unstable. That was the pain that came from the depths of its heart. Even its life leap, Earth Great Tao began to become unstable, full of loopholes. To be honest, this was the best time for the two half-immortals to attack. However, neither of them made a move. At this moment, they somewhat understood the immortals' helplessness, sadness, and separation. Immortal Wu Hua recalled his life. My life has been ordinary. This is not being pretentious. If one day, after living for millions of years, you still can't bring out a few deeds that you can speak of, this kind of life on the path of immortality doesn't have much meaning. Unfortunately, when I understood, I already lacked the strength to rise. For millions of years, I have been waiting, but I couldn't summon up the determination to change. In the end, I waited until now. I was abandoned by the Great Tao. I don't blame the Great Tao. I can only blame myself for being conservative. If you can't adapt to the new universe, the heavenly Tao will abandon you. It's a matter of course. I wanted to resist, but when I really resisted, I found that my resistance was a joke. I only pulled two younger disciples to talk some useless nonsense. It was a distraction, harming others without benefiting myself. Now, at least what I can do is to give my friend, numinous treasure, a stable future. I shouldn't be so selfish. I want to fight to the death, but drag down my friend who has accompanied me for millions of years. As the Leap 8 Heavens Cauldron trembled, the Tao realm power changed. Lu Xiaoyi and the Empyrean Divine Conch were forced into a corner. The Tao realm consciousness of the bamboo hat that had fused into the Leap 8 Heavens Cauldron was also completely stripped out. Then, an illusory energy body appeared. It was the remnant soul of immortal Wuhua that had remained in the heaven cauldron when he died. At this moment, he could see it very clearly. Resist? He couldn't do it himself, so he could only rely on the Leap 8 Heaven's Cauldron's ability. The final result would be to bring his old friend to destruction. Could he succeed in killing or getting rid of these two juniors? Actually, it wasn't important. After passing this test, he couldn't pass the next one. Moreover, there were some words that he didn't want to say a second time. As the Leap 8 Heaven's Cauldron was reluctant to part, the remnant soul of this immortal slowly left the secret space of the numinous treasure. We, the so-called immortals, actually let down these juniors who desire to become immortals the most. They are full of desire and work hard for their entire lives, just for that chance to become immortals. But in our eyes, their efforts are destined to fail. This has nothing to do with hard work or not. It's because of many external reasons. The resentful spirit bodies instantly sensed the immortal's aura and crazily rushed over. Thousands upon thousands of them, endless, all the spirit bodies near the black hole rushed over. After starving for millions of years, they had finally waited for the most delicious food. Immortal Wuhua didn't resist and allowed the spirit bodies to eat him. Cherish it. The change of an era is the best opportunity, because the order will become chaotic at this stage. Your generation may not be the most outstanding in the cultivation world of the universe, but it is the most fortunate. Immortal Wuhua's remnant soul gradually faded away under the frenzied attacks of the resentful spirit bodies. From the beginning to the end, he didn't make any resistance. This also included the Empyrean Divine Conch that didn't know what was going on, and the Leap 8 Heaven's Cauldron that was ordered not to interfere. Of course, this also included the two half-immortal freaks who were watching with their mouths agape. They knew that they could complete the mission, but they didn't know that it would be in such an easy way. Chapter 2006. Taking advantage of immortal Wu Hua's suicide, the bamboo hat slowly withdrew his consciousness from the Leap 8 Heaven's Cauldron. He actually had the chance to control this innate spiritual treasure, but he did not do so, because he could feel the deep hatred of the Leap 8 Heaven's Cauldron towards the two human half-immortals. Subduing it was no different from subduing a barrel of gunpowder. It was like forcing the death of a child's parents in front of him. Therefore, he might as well leave. Furthermore, he could not guarantee that the swordsman hiding in the empty divine magic conch would not have any thoughts of eliminating him. He took 2 steps, but to the swordsman who was used to killing enemies above his level, 2 steps were not enough. Luckily, the swordsman did not make any moves. Who knows if it was because of immortal Wu Hua's words, or because it was afraid of him. His body instantly formed, and he did not care if the remnant soul of immortal Wu Hua had not been completely eaten. He just left and did not look back. Lu Xiaoyi did not move at all. It was not that he could not see the bamboo hat's movement. It was also not that he was afraid of being attacked by the resentful spiritual bodies and did not dare to make a move. He just felt that there was no need. It was not worth it. However, immortal Wu Hua's consciousness had not been completely eaten. Even if there were countless spiritual bodies in front of the remnant soul of an immortal, it was still enough for them to eat for a period of time. The closer to the core, the harder it was to eat. Especially after the bamboo hat left, it displayed an astonishing vitality. Why did you not make a move? That half-immortal is proficient in the great Tao like you. He is your biggest enemy. Immortal Wu Hua was still curious, even when he was about to die. Lu Xiaoyi smiled faintly. There is no need to make a move against an opponent who is not brave enough. In this kind of situation, both sides might suffer. Is it not good to leave him alive? If I really kill him, the higher-ups will find me an even stronger opponent. Junior likes to fight, but I do not like to fight endlessly. Immortal Wu Hua smiled. Smart. You are stronger than that ancestor of yours. There are many things that cannot be solved by fighting. Fighting is only the prerequisite and guarantee for scheming. Lu Xiaoyi sighed. Senior Nose Crow ancestor? Immortal Wu Hua was very regretful. No, the time is too short. There is no chance. This is the regret of many immortals like me in the immortal court. We haven't been able to understand it for millions of years, but fellow Taoist Crow was able to see it right away. Otherwise, the Four Saints' heavens would gather a resistance force that even the immortal court didn't have. If he does not lead, we will be scattered. Lu Xiaoyi disagreed. Don't flatter me. If that is the case, then even the current situation would not be good. Immortal Wu Hua was annoyed. Are you saying that us immortals are all pig teammates? Lu Xiaoyi Wu Hua smiled, but did not answer. Wu Hua as well. As immortal Wu Hua's Wu Wus. Li as Li Wu Hua. Because Li immortals, I am S. Immortals as well. Immortals, Li immortals pay immortals to Wu Hua. He said that he admired Li Wuya, and that was probably the truth. After all, Li Wuya's actions back then had earned him the respect of both friends and foes. But admiration was one thing, and following him was another. 20,000 years ago, when Li Wu Hua was in the immortal court, there were no immortals following him. Even if they only supported him verbally, what was the point of regretting it after 20,000 years? In this sense, he was no different from those who had not accomplished anything in the mortal world. Everyone knew how to give advice in hindsight, but only at the time and place could it show its value. But the last moment of his life, immortal Wu Hua's cherishing of his spirit treasure still showed some qualities of immortal Wu Hua. Whether it was lowering his head before fate or returning to his nature, he was willing to treat Li Wu Hua as a senior worthy of respect. After all, being able to become an immortal was proof of his excellence. There was not much time left. He knew when an old man hoped for the most at the last moment. It was respect, respect, respect. Therefore, he only needed to ask more questions. This would make him feel that there was room for improvement, even if these suggestions were not accepted. Senior, I vaguely saw the changes in the immortal court. Could it be that every immortal has to go through this? Doesn't that mean that the entire immortal court is facing a great change? Immortal Wu Hua said, your thoughts are both right and wrong. In fact, because the immortal court itself did not have an accurate judgment, there were all kinds of opinions. It was also because of the unclear judgment that the news that spread to the lower realm often lost its rigor, making people a loss. But with the fall of the golden immortals one by one, and now it has expanded to the human immortals, some judgments have basically been concluded. I don't dare to say that it is definitely so, but the direction of Dafa has gradually become clear. There are still many changes in the details, but the direction of Dafa is more or less set. In the next few hundred years, the more certain statements will spread to the mortal world. You need to judge the truth yourself. There will be a lot of fake news, and the people who spread it have ulterior motives. You have to learn to distinguish between them. He had decided to share some of his experiences with this junior from the lower worlds. Not for anything else, but for the sake of this junior's orthodoxy. Only when he had fallen to such a state did he truly understand what Li Wuya had sacrificed back then. The innate great Tao collapses and an immortal dies. We can't completely determine the order and time of the collapse in advance. We can only narrow this range to a certain extent, probably earlier and more accurate than your intuition. But there is one thing that the circle of golden immortals is clear about, but they won't say it. But since everyone is in the four sacred heavens, they can always sense something. For example, what I told you just now, the innate great Tao fragments have the consciousness of the golden immortal great Tao master. I didn't lie to you about this. However, you must remember that not every single grand Tao Lord acts in this way. I can't distinguish. That's not within the scope of my ability. I can't guess. That goes against my cultivation philosophy. What I want to say is that at the very least, the first two great Tao's collapse, morality and destiny, don't have a great Tao master's consciousness attached to them. You come from the sword vein of Xianyuan. Out of respect for Li Wuya, I'm telling you something deeper. Even if Li Wuya is actually the one who destroyed my job. As for morality and destiny, it's up to you juniors to see if your eyes are bright enough. Lu Xiaoyi said bitterly. Senior, you can't completely blame Crow Ancestor, right? The change of eras is an internal need of the universe's changes. Immortal Wu Hua snorted. The principle is correct, but there's a matter of time. It's normal for a cultivator to go into seclusion for 100 years, but it's the life of a mortal. A nap by the heavens is 1,000,000 years, and millions of years is the life of an immortal. Yearly Wu Ya is the one who made the heavens less of a nap, and, in the end, ruined my life. So I said that he's the instigator. Am I wronging him? Chapter 2007. Lu Xiaoyi was speechless. Indeed, on the level of the universe, ending its nap in advance was everything to the immortals. The immortal elder did not dwell on this. He really did not have much time left. When the universe changes, the 36 innate great Daos will disperse. This is the prerequisite for the change. Only by breaking it can it be rebuilt. But the problem is, what if it's still the same piece of mud? What kind of new things can you create? The Golden Immortals did not oppose the change of the era. Firstly, they also knew that this was the general trend and could not be stopped. Secondly, they knew that they were still the same piece of mud. Therefore, since the collapse of the Great Daos, the rules in all aspects became stricter. Everyone was in their place. Immortals were not allowed to go down to the 4 sacred heavens, and half-immortals were restricted to the inner and outer scenic heavens. It was as if they were welcoming the new era with joy. Even a rabbit knows to kick its legs before it dies. Are the high and mighty immortals so good-tempered as to resign themselves to adversity? It was not that they were willing to do so, but because of the pressure from Qingwei heaven, they had no choice but to do so. If they were obedient, they would not be punished openly. Of course, the golden immortals of Shangqing heaven would not be so ruthless. They also had to give the human immortals and genuine immortals a way out. The prerequisite is that you have to be valued by them, connected to their Tao meridians, and useful. Otherwise, you will be like me now. You can only complain to a junior half-immortal from the lower realm. Lu Xiaoyi listened quietly, trying to find something useful for himself. He knew that this was the old immortal's last fight against injustice. Although this fight was a little too insignificant, like some complaints, he could not ask for too much. After all, if the immortal elder was not like this, how could he be reduced to the point of being the first to fall in the inner scenic heavens? The golden immortals and Daoyuo golden immortals will not be left alive, but no one knows which method they will use to return. But in my opinion, at least half of the golden immortals after the change of the future era are simply old wine in a new bottle. The rest are those who are disdainful and those who have failed to bottle. Next, I will talk about the genuine immortals and human immortals. They have no great Tao fragments to rely on, so they can only use other methods. Take my method, for example, but everyone has their own abilities, so it's not something that I can recklessly predict. Lu Xiaoyi added. Do all immortals face this tribulation? Immortal Wu Hua was very certain. Of course, there were countless Daos in the universe, each with their own unique characteristics. But no matter which post-celestial Tao it was, weren't they all derived from the evolution of innate Daos? Some took one, and some took many. One could say that it was a combination of the 36 innate Daos, but they were all related to the combination of the 36 innate Daos. With the 36 innate Daos crumbling and the foundation gone, how could these post-innate Daos survive alone? However, due to the different combinations and different levels of immersion, there was a difference in order. However, at the final moment of the epic changing, no one could escape. I'm the first immortal to die in the interior heaven, but I'm not the first to die in the immortal court. There were already immortals in the Blight realm who died in the interior heaven, but you didn't know about it. Lu Xiaoyi was very alert. Actually, the new bottle of old wine, you said, to put it bluntly, it's possession, right? At this time, immortal Wu Hua was a bit fearless. Your understanding isn't wrong. However, you have to understand that the so-called possession in the lower cultivation world is actually the most unskilled kind of possession. Forcefully controlling a cultivator's soul and replacing it has too many repercussions, and there's no guarantee of success. Immortals wouldn't do that. To immortals, the highest level of possession is like those golden immortals, splitting their consciousness into countless parts and casting a wide net to catch the big fish. Only then can they guarantee a higher success rate. Before you become an immortal, you won't be able to sense their existence. You will be you, but your understanding of the Tao realm will slowly guide you through time. You will unknowingly walk in the same direction as them, and finally become a Tao realm expert like them. Do you still think that you are talented in the Tao realm? We call this method the Tao realm possession. You are still you, but in terms of Tao realm, you are a copy of a golden immortal. And this golden immortal is also using this method to achieve the goal of rebirth and continue to control this natural great Tao according to his understanding. Don't think of immortals, especially golden immortals and great overarching golden immortals, too narrow-minded. They actually don't care about this body at all. Your habits, past and future, your friends and family, they don't care about any of these because when you become an immortal, these things have to be abandoned. They only care about Tao realm. And as long as this natural great Tao still exists, they will use this method to achieve eternal life. They will conceal themselves among the many people with such potential, completely unconscious, and wholeheartedly help you comprehend Tao, just like you comprehended it yourself. If at some time you feel as if you've been enlightened with flashes of inspiration and frequent epiphanies, then you have to be careful. This may not be your true ability. These people could be first severance or second severance. They could be sun god or blight tier. No matter, they won't even stop the competition between cultivators with the same golden immortal's consciousness attached to them. Everything will be left to nature until the moment they truly become an immortal. That is the day they take over control. Of course, you are still you, but Tao realm is no longer you. That is some golden immortals. So even if you want me to say whether you are still you at this time, I can't say for sure. This is the most brilliant possession. What the golden immortals are seizing is not your person, but the natural great Tao. As long as the natural great Tao is his, then what does it matter which half-immortal finally takes that step? This time, Lu Xiaoyi was truly dumbfounded. If the people above schemed against the cultivators below like this, how many half-immortals could resist? Deity Wu Hua was very satisfied with this junior's shock. He finally made this stubborn little guy become serious. However, your sword vein doesn't have to be too worried. 20, 30 natural great Taos, and there won't be any golden immortal's consciousness that will choose to help the sword vein, especially your Xian Yuan sword sect, because that crow ancestor of yours is really too detestable in the immortal court. Most importantly, they're also afraid that their great Tao has anything to do with Li Wuya's natural morals. The facts have long proven that those who are entangled with Li Wuya all don't have a good ending. So I am very relieved to say these words to you. If it was an orthodox Taoist, I wouldn't dare to speak freely. Lu Xiaoyi was speechless. Being detestable had such an effect. He also knew that this was only deity Wu Hua's guess and was not absolute. What if there was one who didn't walk the normal path? They were all at least golden immortal existences, so what couldn't they do? This old guy was very detestable. With just a few words, he made him suspicious of all the freaks, even including those closest to him. True, if there weren't these golden immortals hiding behind to help, how could such a freak appear? Chapter 2008. But there was one thing that Qin Xian did not seem to have any problems because the Tao of Yin and Yang had not collapsed. Senior sister Yin Song was also fine, and the cycle of reincarnation had not collapsed. But just because there was no problem now did not mean there would be no problem in the future. This matter was tricky. Who could control their own pursuit of their own Tao fragments? Deity Wuchua was still talking endlessly, but his consciousness was transmitted very quickly, and he probably realized that there was not much time left. What I said just now was the way of golden immortals. With the help of the Tao fragments, they did not have to worry about not being able to find a successor. This method can actually be used by man immortals and true immortals, but it is too troublesome. To find someone in the universe who has the same post-celestial Tao as themselves and has enough potential is extremely difficult, so they would usually look for it in their own orthodoxy. Lu Xiaoyi was speechless. What orthodoxy can be passed down for millions of years and still be as good as before? Deity Wuchua said, exactly. So Tao state possession is very rare among true immortals and man immortals. There may be an example, but it cannot be popularized. But they have other methods, such as the construction of the past self and the future superego. Lu Xiaoyi's eyes were opened. In the methods of immortals, there was nothing they could not do, especially the construction of the future superego. Immortals implanted their current situation into the superego vision of the half-immortal cultivators, making them think that this is the template of their future after becoming immortals. So they keep working hard in this direction and finally willingly become someone else. There are many similar methods, but they have one thing in common, which is that they will never forcibly invade your mind and attack your spirit. That is the lowest level method, and the consequences are endless. Deity Wuchua was indignant, but his consciousness was getting weaker and weaker. My ability in this area is a little weak. I could not find a cultivator of the Leap Earth Tao, and my own technique could not invade the past and future of others, so I could only do it by force. So I became a negative example. Lu Xiaoyi said weakly, "You seem to be a little late in arranging things after death." Deity Wuchua admitted, "Yes. I am not vigilant enough. I did not plan ahead, and my own ability is not in this area. In these hundreds of years, I don't know if you have noticed, but all kinds of spiritual treasures and strange objects have suddenly appeared in the universe. It was just that the immortals themselves could not descend to the lower realm, so they threw down their treasures, especially in the inner and outer scenic sky where half-immortals gather. If you encounter a similar fortuitous encounter one day, you must be careful." Lu Xiaoyi blushed with shame. In this aspect, I haven't had any fortuitous encounters, so I don't care too much about it. Immortal Wu Hua mocked himself. "That's right, I forgot that you came from the sword vein. You don't care about external things. This is a good habit." The remnant soul of the immortal elder had become so thin that it was barely visible to the naked eye. His time would soon be up as the countless resentful spirits gnawed at him. With a final sigh, his divine sense became very weak. "My life has been a boring one. If I could do it all over again, I would have raised my arms and cheered when Li Wuya shattered his Tao. Unfortunately, even immortals can't cure regret. These hateful spiritual entities are like ants gnawing at my soul. Dying in such a way would be the most shameful way for an immortal to die, right? I more or less made up for the debt I owed them. In the end, I still hope to die with dignity. Little friend, take out your flying sword and send me on my way." Lu Xiaoyi did not move at all. His tone was sentimental. "Old senior, my sword is for killing enemies, not friends." Immortal Wu Hua shouted, so long-winded. "You don't have the spirit of a swordsman at all. You've cultivated for thousands of years, and you don't even have this bit of decisiveness? You're just going to watch an old man suffer in front of you? 10,000 ants gnawing at his heart. Unbearable pain? I came willingly. There's no karma. Don't make me look down on you for being so wishy-washy." Lu Xiaoyi still did not move. He said with sincerity, "I can't do it. I'm a soft-hearted person. I'm afraid that if I kill an immortal today, I'll have nightmares when I go back." Immortal Wu Hua became silent. After a long time, he said, "What's wrong with this world? It's become so cold. There's no trust between people. Even if I give you all my life's experience and the highest secret of the immortal court, I still can't get a quick death?" Lu Xiaoyi was very ashamed. "Although I'm from the sword vein, I'm not a bloodthirsty person. I do good deeds, respect the old, and love the young. I do good deeds every day." Immortal Wu Hua's remnant soul struggled and swayed. It was flickering, about to be extinguished at any moment. The two waited in silence for it to end. Regardless of whether immortal Wuhua was in pain or not, Lu Xiaoyi's heart was as hard as iron. The resentful spiritual entities became even crazier. Because there was not much food left, the scene of hundreds of thousands of formless spiritual entities squeezing together made one's scalp tingle. At the last moment, immortal Wuhua sighed. Good, good, good. Human swordsman is quick to repay kindness and revenge, forthright and chivalrous. Looking at you today, you're just like Li Wuya from back then, two-faced and sinister. I didn't lose unjustly. I can't blame anyone. The resentful spiritual entities swallowed the last piece of food. Those who didn't manage to snatch it began to howl crazily, throwing each other into a mess. Lu Xiaoyi began to slowly retreat. He glanced at the silent leap 8 heavens cauldron. He didn't want to say anything, but since he had already completed the task, he couldn't delay the great monarch's orders. The universe is chaotic, and the clan is a harbor. The Numinous Treasure Clan's main goal in this chaos is to protect themselves. So if you want to live safely, joining the clan is a good choice. The Numinous Treasure Great Monarch asked me to pass you a message. If you're interested, you should interact more and understand the chaos of this world. It's always beneficial. The Leap 8 Heavens Cauldron was indifferent, not saying a word. Lu Xiaoyi was a little bored. He had already passed the message, so the rest had nothing to do with him. But since he had already spoken, he didn't mind saying a few more words. You know what your master wants, right? Leap 8 snorted. So what if I know? Shouldn't I? Only you are allowed to scheme against us, but we can't retaliate? Lu Xiaoyi smiled. Of course. That's your right. I came here to accept the task. If necessary, I can even destroy you. So no matter what you do, I won't care. What I find strange is, why did you choose me out of the two of you? Is it because my potential is greater? This time, Leap 8 replied, Immortal Elder lost because he was too soft-hearted. He wanted to do bad things, but he couldn't harden his heart. He wanted to do good things, but he didn't have the will to do so. In such a dilemma, he couldn't rely on either side. In the end, the heavenly Tao came to him first. It's not without reason. Lu Xiaoyi asked. Lord Leap awakened his spiritual wisdom before the immortal elder's accident, right? Leap 8 snorted. My awakening happened thousands of years ago. The wisdom of the numinous treasure is innate wisdom, and there's no need to cultivate it. 1,000 years ago, I advised him to make plans early and prepare for a rainy day. In the end, he couldn't do anything. He didn't have many methods to begin with, and he had countless scruples. In the end, other than helping him plant a trace of his true spirit in my body, he didn't accomplish anything else. Coveting luck and being afraid of the slightest thing, how can he not be defeated? Chapter 2009. Lu Xiaoyi was speechless. In his contact with this immortal Wu Hua, he found that this person did indeed have such a problem. It was somewhat inconceivable for this kind of personality defect to appear among immortals. But after thinking about it carefully, it seemed to make sense. It was still necessary to start with the cultivation environment to completely understand the huge impact of the changes in the cultivation era on cultivators. In the current cultivation world, each and every one of the cultivators was extremely cunning. Each and every one of them had a 7-orifices heart, a vision, and a way of dealing with people. They were indispensable in all aspects. If not, you would not be able to climb up and would have been eliminated by the waves. Therefore, almost all of them were decisive, persevering, and making choices. When it was time to take risks, they would not hesitate. Just like that Ding Shan that Lu Xiaoyi met. He had ordinary aptitude, ordinary potential, and also came from a refining background. When it was time to be ruthless, he could also be ruthless. When dealing with the 2 half-immortal monsters, he was also ruthless. This was the characteristic of the era. With the prevalence of cultivation in the universe, cultivators were forced to strengthen themselves in terms of mental state. Only by not having obvious personality defects could they survive. But if time was turned back millions of years, the cultivation environment at that time was completely different from now. Most of the energy of the current cultivators was fighting with people, while most of the energy of the ancient cultivators was fighting with nature. The difference was huge. It was precisely because there were not many cultivators in the ancient times and most of the immortals were born during that period that it was normal for immortals to have personality defects in some aspects. Of course, this also had to be reversed. It was precisely because the immortals in the ancient times were purer that there were relatively fewer messy things. Nothing was absolute. If every immortal was like the current cultivators, all 7 orifices heart, good at internal strife, and full of culture, not to mention millions of years, it was hard to say if the cultivation world of this universe could persist for hundreds of thousands of years. Each had its own advantages and disadvantages. That was why the Leap 8 Heavens Cauldron ridiculed its owner like this, a friend that had accompanied it for millions of years. I told him long ago that he had to prepare early and plan in the lower realm in advance. He didn't listen and insisted on talking about the rules of immortality. When the signs of immortal death appeared, I advised him to speed up the process and sent me to the lower realm to obtain an opportunity to set up a trap in the mortal world. He was afraid of death, so he insisted on dragging me along to fight against the heavenly solution. In the end, he didn't last for many years. When he died, his remnant soul followed me to the lower bound. I advised him to immediately take over my body and not hesitate. Things might change if he delayed. However, he was afraid of the punishment from the immortal court. In the end, he came to such a desolate place, and nothing changed. Even if the 2 of you appeared, he still had a chance. He took advantage of the bamboo hat to transform into a Tao realm and enter my body. There was actually a high chance that he could use the Tao realm to possess my body and hide in it without anyone noticing. In the end, he was afraid that he would offend the golden, immortal consciousnesses that had transformed into consciousnesses and seek revenge on him. I'm afraid that the orthodox Taoism is too powerful, so I'm hesitating. The more the Leap 8 Heavens Cauldron talked, the angrier it became. There were so many opportunities in the beginning that he didn't dare to make a decision. But now, at the last moment, he gave up the safest option with the highest success rate and chose the most dramatic method of possession. They couldn't even hold him back. He said that the swordsman's brain wasn't good, that the sword vein wasn't well-liked in the immortal court, and that no one took care of it. He said that he knew that there was a tiger in the mountain, but he still insisted on going to the mountain. He said that he would fight to live even if he was in the face of death. In fact, he lost his mind at the last moment. He knew that he had lost many opportunities because of his cowardice. In the end, he became unreasonable and impulsive. Lu Xiaoyi was sweating profusely. Lord Leap, what is possession by refining weapons? The Leap 8 Heavens Cauldron curled its lips. Isn't it an ability that he learned from me? There are Tao realm possession, future construction possession, and so on. He's good at refining, so he can obtain it through artifacts, such as a cultivator's life-bound artifact. For you, of course, it's the flying sword. Previously, he expressed his goodwill in every possible way and wanted to dig out his heart, such as admiringly Wuya, and so on. In fact, it was to obtain a certain degree of sympathy from you. This way, as long as you slashed at him with your sword, you would definitely have pity in your heart, and there would be a flaw in your killing intent. His core remnant soul would be able to take advantage of this and quietly sneak into your sword plate when you put away your sword. In the future, it would slowly influence you imperceptibly and finally affect you. What? You don't know about this? Then why did you refuse to slay him? Isn't it because you saw something? Lu Xiaoyi didn't hide anything. There was no need for him to hide anything from an innate spiritual treasure like the Leap 8. I can see part of the state of the resentment spiritual body. What puzzles me is that these spiritual bodies seem to have swallowed a lot, but they actually don't have the slightest involvement with the core of the immortal elder. Obviously, you can't reason with these spiritual bodies and make them pay attention to what they should and shouldn't swallow when they swallow. Then, there's only one possibility. The core remnant soul of the immortal elder has a way to protect itself. What is he waiting for? Is this what he meant by solemn and stirring? So, I will definitely refuse his request. I'm not brave. I'm afraid of death and pain. This time, it was the Leap 8 Heavens Cauldron's turn to be speechless. I understand. The immortal elder has been high and mighty for too long, too far away from the intrigues of the mortal world. He thinks that his plan is unparalleled, but in the eyes of you lower realm cultivators, it's full of loopholes. I've already advised him not to touch a swordsman. Swordsman is too evil. Just find an ordinary one. Lu Xiaoyi corrected it. Leap Lord, you've been saying that your master is wrong, but do you know that you're wrong? He's a master, and you're the supplement. If you say too much, you'll make your master lose face. And there are some things that you've said wrong. Why would he choose an ordinary one? If he really chose an ordinary one and couldn't become an immortal, what's the point of everything he's done? He probably chose me because he thinks more highly of me. Or maybe the crow ancestor has stimulated him too much, so he wants to become a swordsman to do things? Forget it. How can these things be explained clearly? The immortal elder is already confused, and you speak bluntly. Also, what I want to know is that bamboo hat person who left, he knows what's going to happen next, right? The Leap 8 Heavens Cauldron hesitated slightly, but still decided to tell the truth. He knows. The immortal elder communicated with him. There's karma between them. And as a thought, the immortal elder didn't want to drag him down. Lu Xiaoyi said meaningfully, I'm afraid it's not just that, right? The immortal elder appeared to help someone achieve the second severance. Can this also be considered a kind of possession? That bamboo hat person has already fallen for it, right? The immortal elder only wanted to be more secure, and setting up a trap on two people is better than one. So the one released must be him, because he's already fallen for it. What do you think of my words, Leap Lord? The Leap 8 Heavens Cauldron was silent, but silence was actually also a kind of attitude. Lu Xiaoyi laughed loudly. Why are you telling me this? Actually, you can also remain silent. Chapter 2010. The Leap 8 Heavens Cauldron was a little depressed. It realized that no matter if it was its former master or itself, they were incomparable to the most outstanding human beings in terms of intelligence. You didn't expose the immortal old man's intentions in the end, allowing him to retain a bit of face. He's very prideful, so I'm willing to say a few more words to you. Lu Xiaoyi smiled faintly. For someone like him, who was experienced and had seen through human nature, this was the most basic quality. He only had a little bit of soul left, so what was there to expose? What good would it do for you if you made him unhappy before he died? It would be better to find an excuse so that both sides wouldn't expose each other, leaving each other some face. This kind of attitude was the attitude of cultivation. See, the Leap 8 Heavens Cauldron was about to reap the rewards. Otherwise, why would it say a few more words to him? This fully showed that even if he was about to die, he still cared about his face. If he wasn't used to doing evil, it would be very strange if he did it once. And it would be even more embarrassing if he was exposed again. In fact, there were many similar examples in the modern world. If he was caught doing evil for the first time and was humiliated, he might go all out and do worse things. However, if you gave him a way out, he might feel that he wasn't made to be an evil person and stop. There's a lot of knowledge in dealing with people, but unfortunately, not everyone understood this. Your master, your immortal friend isn't a bad person. This is actually very clear because he died the earliest. A real evil immortal doesn't die. In the beginning, he was pushed out to take the blame. Over 1,000,000 years of cultivation have been wasted just like that. No one would be willing to accept that. If it were me, I would have done a lot of evil things long ago. The immortal old man was a good person. At least he didn't want to drag you down in the end. The Leap 8 Heavens Cauldron began to whimper. Although its mouth was full of complaints, how could it forget millions of years of living together in the blink of an eye? It had just been born not long ago, so it didn't know how to express or hide its feelings. But no matter what, this half-immortal swordsman wasn't annoying. Just like it, he had a poisonous mouth but a good heart. After staying in the immortal world for millions of years, it wouldn't have many friends down there. However, if it had to find someone it could trust, It would rather believe this cunning swordsman. It had a request, and it didn't want to hide it. Lu Jun, I don't want a third person to know about Xian Wang's final destination. In fact, we all know that the immortal elder's intentions may not be as he wishes. Everything bodes ill for him. However, there is no reason for everyone to know about it, especially the person himself. The meaning of Leap 8 was very clear. Wu Hua, Immortal Elder, took advantage of the display of the immortals and picked the bamboo hat out of all the cultivators in the inner Scenic Heaven Observatory. He gave him benefits and also lit up a lamp for his future rebirth. Even lighting up a lamp was far from enough. Even the golden immortals would cast a wide net throughout the universe and use numbers to make up for the success rate, let alone a mere human immortal like him. But as long as it was lit, there was hope. Lu Xiaoyi glanced at it. You don't sound like you're begging. What if I don't agree? What do you plan to do? The Leap 8 Heavens Cauldron said without hesitation, I can't speak. You know that. No one in the immortal court talked to me. It was normal for us not to communicate for tens of thousands of years. But Xian Wang is my friend. If you don't agree, I'll perish together with you here. Even if I can't do anything to you, with these resentful spirits around, you won't have a good time either. Lu Xiaoyi nodded. A very good threat. You've grasped the main point. It's reasonable and has the means and consequences. I've decided to submit to your threat. But if we make a deal, it's more meaningful and safer than a threat. Leap 8 Heavens Cauldron was very confused. I don't seem to have anything that I can take out for a deal other than myself. Lu Xiaoyi waved his hand. I don't dare to take you. Otherwise, I won't even be able to sleep well. Originally, after I killed the last remnant soul of Wu Hua, Immortal Elder, I felt uneasy and often blamed myself. Leap 8 Heavens Cauldron asked, when did you kill him? Didn't you refuse to use the last sword? As soon as it said that, it immediately reacted. Yes, my eyes are playing tricks on me. I remembered wrongly. The last remnant soul of Xian Wang was killed by Lord Lu. He fell into Xian Wang's Tao of artifact forging and possession. Lu Xiaoyi sighed. You think the humans are too cunning? That they scheme against each other all the time? That you can't get along? Leap 8 Heavens Cauldron spoke the truth. Yes, it feels like I'll be sold out at any time. If I talk to you more, I don't know which pit I'll fall into again. I'll accept your suggestion. When I'm stable, I'll contact the Great Lord. Lord Lu, are you familiar with the Great Lord? Lu Xiaoyi shook his head. Not familiar, but he's my senior. After arranging all the trivial matters, Lu Xiaoyi began to return with the empty god magic conch. His current cultivation ability had been reduced to more than 60%, which was close to the edge of danger. Fortunately, the mission this time was more daunting than dangerous. Otherwise, it would be really difficult to end it. A seemingly peaceful process was actually fraught with danger. On the surface, he looked timid, but in reality, he was constantly up to no good. After meeting him this time, he would probably not see him for a while, so he would definitely avoid him on purpose. This person was also very interesting. He always made you feel that he was avoiding you, but when you really met him, he made you feel that he was unbearable. Then, in this feeling of contempt, you would be viciously tricked again and then drifted far away. Lu Xiaoyi was good at tactics, while the other was good at strategy. It was clear who was better. Qing Xian and the others were also confused by his appearance, right? But the older the ginger, the spicier it was. In the end, he was still the one who was tricked. Lu Xiaoyi was very willing to cooperate with his friends. He raised and raised again. What left the deepest impression on him from this trip was that immortals were no longer so high and mighty. They also had helplessness, weaknesses, and shortcomings. In fact, their shortcomings were very obvious. They were not as powerful and invincible as he had imagined. A very practical reason was that if you wanted to train a person's conspiracy, then it was best to put him in the dirtiest place in the world, the Imperial Court. Under this premise, in fact, the Immortal Court was far from complicated. Because there were too few immortals, their superior methods could be predicted and judged. As a cultivator from the lower bound, they were not completely led by the nose. This was a very important discovery. Don't think of the opponent as too strong. As a cultivator from the lower bound, they still had the power to fight. Of course, golden immortals and Aluo golden immortals might be an exception. The situation of immortal Wu Hua told him that there were actually many immortals who were not satisfied in the four sacred heavens. In theory, such people accounted for the majority. They might also be the largest group that would cause chaos in the lower bound in the future. Possession was given a new meaning by the immortals. It was completely different from the definition of possession in the minds of the cultivators in the main world. In the eyes of the immortals, the body was not important, and even the thoughts were not important. What was important was the Tao state. As long as the Tao state existed, it was eternal. No matter who obtained the favor of the heavenly Tao in the end, after a long time, whether you were a newcomer or an old master of the great Tao, under the same understanding of the Tao state, what was the difference? Or perhaps the golden immortals and Daoyuo golden immortals were just carriers, and the real masters of the universe were these innate great Taoists? As long as they acknowledged me, anyone could be the Taoist master. Chapter 2011. Lu Xiaoyi had always been biased against the changing trends of the epochs. He had always believed that it was appropriate to divide the period before the change of era into 3 periods. Before the 12 great Taoists collapsed, it was the early stage. Only cultivators from the mortal world could participate. Before the 24 great Taoists collapsed, they were in the middle stage. There were half-immortal freaks who came down to the lower realm. In the middle and later stages, there might be true half-immortals who came down. Before all 36 great Taoists collapsed, it was the era of immortals. The role of half-immortals like them would be very limited. He was also worried about how the outstanding half-immortals would coexist with the immortals during this era. In the field of martial arts, he would most likely not be able to beat them. In the field of literature, he could only become a pawn of the immortals of the lower realm. However, after hearing immortal elder Wu Hua's words, he suddenly realized that even in the later stages before the epic change, immortals might not be able to descend, because they were like clay bodhisattvas crossing a river, unable to even protect themselves. The collapse of the great Tao could destroy existences like golden immortals and zenith heaven golden immortals. There was no reason why it could not destroy existences like human immortals and true immortals. It was all the same. With the rebuilding of the great Tao, the immortal court would definitely be rebuilt as well. The crux of the problem was how many newcomers would climb up during this rebuilding process. How many old immortals had changed their appearances? Based on this inference, the conflict between Buddhism and Taoism, as well as the conflict between heterodox schools, was not the most important thing. Most importantly, the battle between the new forces and the old forces was the focal point of the change of eras. If you want to achieve something, at the very least, you have to know the general trend. Otherwise, you will be like a headless fly, unable to use your strength properly. Immortals could not descend, because not a single one of them could survive until the end of the epic. From now on, or perhaps from a few hundred years ago, the immortal court had become an extra-large graveyard. Immortals continued to fall from the sky. It might have been slower at the beginning, but it would become faster and faster as more and more great Taoists collapsed. Meanwhile, those post-celestial great Taoists that were formed from the combination of pre-celestial great Taoists would not be able to hold on any longer. With their Tao foundation damaged, they would no longer have a reason to become an immortal. Who would collapse if not you? The one that could last until the end would definitely be the last Khanate great Tao and the postnatal great Tao that was related to it. It could be time, or it could be unification. It was hard to say. Under such a procedure, the immortals were all in danger. They didn't even have time to make arrangements for their funerals, so how could they have the mood to come down to the lower realm and get involved in the right and wrong? To them, the most important thing was to find a new bottle to keep their old wine in after the change of era. Other than that, nothing else mattered. From this, it could be inferred that the first stage of the universe's changes had already passed, which was the stage of the cultivators of the origin world. The middle stage should be dominated by monstrous half-immortal geniuses like them, and the late stage should be the stage for all half-immortals. When would the immortals appear? It should be after the change of the era. Let's call it the post-epic era. At this time, many new and old immortals officially appeared. They had ascended to immortality and joined the Tao at the moment the epic changed. There was no longer the danger of their Tao collapsing. Thus, they began to form factions and fight for territory and the right to speak. This was the normal rhythm. Only when he understood this point did he know what he should and shouldn't do now. In other words, he could have acted even more arrogantly. He could have roped in more forces and friends, and strive to become the spokesperson of the emerging forces in the post-epic era. What the Crow ancestor wanted to do, others didn't even dare to think about, and those rebellious thoughts could only be achieved in this way. For the first time, Lu Xiaoyi had a plan for his future. This was his strength. To achieve this, it was impossible to rely on brute force alone. The Crow ancestor's fist was strong enough, but what was the result? He had to find a common point of interest. These people, these half-immortals, these future rulers of the immortal court, couldn't stand on his side just because of a friendship. He had to make them feel that there were benefits to be gained, and that there was a future to look forward to. Lu Xiaoyi floated in the void of the mirror, silently reflecting. This Heavenly Eyes mission was very meaningful to him. From now on, he had a clear enough plan. For his own cultivation, he also had countless reference templates for the construction of his future superego. It was no longer as vague and muddle-headed as before. On the way back, there was one more thing he needed to observe, and that was the fragments of the Great Path in his Mudpill Palace. He wanted to try and see if he could find the traces left by the Golden Immortals on them. This possibility was not big, because he had been with each fragment for at least hundreds of years, and he was very familiar with them. If there were any abnormalities, he should have found them long ago and not wait until now. Sure enough, no matter what special method he used, he couldn't find any abnormalities. This didn't mean that there were no traces of the Golden Immortals on these fragments of the Great Path. In his opinion, there were only two possibilities. Either the Golden Immortals didn't feel suitable, so they didn't show up and stayed undercover until the end of time, or the Golden Immortals didn't feel suitable, so the traces disappeared automatically, as if they had never existed. There was a limit to the traces of the Golden Immortals' consciousness, and it was impossible to maintain countless branches forever. When the fragments were captured by nature, they would naturally disappear, or for those cultivators who had no hope of becoming immortals. He didn't find them, and he couldn't judge whether they existed or not. He would just leave them as they were. Of course, he wouldn't give them up because of some hidden danger. As long as he didn't integrate the fragments of the Great Path, these things would never be able to take over his body in the Tao state. Moreover, he always felt that it might not be a bad thing to keep such a possible bridge of communication with the Golden Immortals' consciousness. Cultivation was carried out in the constant correction of deviations. He was alone because in this process, no one had the ability to give him advice and guide him. There shouldn't be such a person. This was the uniqueness of the immortals. They were a species that couldn't be bought wholesale. Only if you were special enough, the heavenly axiom might reward you with a mouthful of immortal food. He was also lucky because in his experience, there were always some processes that benefited him a lot. For example, the understanding of the past in the odd righteous Pure Land and the insight of the future in the Wall of Mirrors. One thing touched him. The odd righteous Pure Land was sent to him by the exterior immortal monarch, and he didn't even know the name. The matter of immortal Wu Hua was a task assigned by Lord Lingbao. These two adventures were directly related to the immortals. What did it mean? Obviously, the immortals in the immortal court had already started to set up a trap in the mortal world. He was just one of them. There were many immortals in the immortal court, and they all had their own affinity. Lu Xiaoyi had such an opportunity, and the other half-immortals weren't far off. Then, were the exterior immortal monarch and Lord Lingbao in the same group? If not, It was pardonable that Lord Linglong supported him, but it was a little strange that the exterior immortal monarch helped him. It didn't seem to match at all. It was said that the crow ancestor didn't do anything good when he was in the exterior realm. Lu Xiaoyi was the same. Chapter 2012. On Lu Xiaoyi's return journey, he did not get lost under the guidance of the empty divine conch. This was the greatest help that this natural spirit treasure had given him. Actually, in terms of their relationship, they were not considered to be master and servant in a contract, but a mutual recognition with Ding Shan's help. The prerequisite for this recognition was that they did not go against the conch's instincts, did not enslave it, and did not take it in. They were just like two friends traveling together. When this journey ended, it would be the time for them to part. This was the tacit understanding between high-level creatures of cultivation, and also a rule, even if the conch did not have consciousness now. After flying like this for a while, he could faintly sense the system of road signs of the wall of reflection, and only then did he put away the empty, divine conch. It was best not to let others see this thing, or it would be very troublesome, and he could possibly become a target of scorn and be beaten up by everyone. This was the border of the system of road signs, and usually very few people would come here. There was nothing to explore in the wall of reflection. There were no astronomical phenomena, no realm, and no historical remains. The mission was only to eliminate the spiritual bodies of resentment, and there was no difference between going deeper and eliminating them in a shallow layer. Thus, no one was willing to venture deeper and take the risk without any reason. There was a strong wave of spiritual opportunity coming over. That was someone fighting. To dare to fight in this place, they were quite bold. Lu Xiaoyi also found his journey of reflection very funny. It seemed that he had been watching people fight all along, but had never gotten involved. It was like this when he met Ding Shan, and it was also like this when he was entangled with the Celestial Elder, and now it was happening again. He still had more than 60% of his cultivation, and it seemed to be enough to support him for a short fight. It was not that he was addicted, but the wave of aura that came over was very strong. That was the aura of a fourth severance, fifth severance, or ancient technique second severance. He was very interested in the fights between seniors. It was not like he would lose a piece of flesh just by watching. It was three great cultivators. One was a second severance Buddhist ancient technique, and two were fourth and fifth blight Taoists of the fourth and fifth blight. The fight was very intense. In this area of the sky, the density of resentment spiritual entities was much higher than in the shallower areas. With the intensity of their battle, it was like a bright light in the wilderness, attracting spiritual entities. However, there were not many spiritual entities around the battleground where the three of them were fighting. The reason was because of the way the three of them were fighting. The three of them were using the incarnation shallow swimming method, and they were constantly moving. They could fight at any time, leave their yang spirits, and move at any time. They used the yang spirit body to attract the attention of their spiritual bodies, but their real bodies were not affected. While they were constantly moving, they always kept themselves in a state of being unhindered. This was actually the most common method that half-immortals used to fight using mirrors. Otherwise, if they didn't restrain themselves when dealing with a single spiritual body, they would only be able to fight more and more spiritual bodies. In the end, they would sink into a sea of spiritual bodies. However, since the three of them dared to use their techniques so unscrupulously in such a deep void, one had to admit that their strength was impressive. At the Tao Realm Scroll of Battle of Techniques, there would be dozens of spiritual entities attracted over at any time, but these spiritual entities would never be able to catch up to the cultivators. They could only follow behind them and eat **T. Although their numbers were increasing, they just couldn't catch up. This was a problem of intelligence. Although the previous incarnations of the resentment spiritual entities were all cultivators of the Blight realm, their strength was not flexible when they lost their rationality, so they were not difficult to deal with. Lu Xiaoyi followed from afar, not going forward rashly. Just like when adults were fighting, a child could only watch from afar. It was not that he was not strong enough, but that he really did not know which side he should help if he were to make a move. In terms of the circle of inside and outside Jingtian, he should help the ancient monk. In terms of a difference in orthodoxy, he should help the Taoist of the exterior, which was very difficult. According to the universal rules of the cultivation world of the universe, when high-level cultivators fought, low-level cultivators were not allowed to watch. Of course, there were no hard and fast rules. If you wanted to watch, no one would stop you. If you were accidentally injured, you deserved it. Or after both sides stopped, there were high-level cultivators who vented their anger on the bystanders. The rules couldn't save those who deserved to die. However, Lu Xiaoyi was skilled and daring. There was nothing that he didn't dare to watch. It only depended on his mood, and there was no need to worry about whether he should or should not. He was considering whether he should be a peacemaker or not. However, without knowing the grudges between the two sides, such a rash action was inappropriate. If it was in the past, he would not easily get involved in these inexplicable fights. However, after listening to Immortal Wu Hua's experience, he knew that he should continue to expand his influence in the half-immortal level. His current influence could barely cover the level of evildoers. It wasn't that under orders, they would respond to Jing Tsong, but in this level, there was no one who had more influence than him. He could never be the leader, but at least no one could surpass him in influence. These three great cultivators didn't seem like people who would vent their anger. At least after he followed them for a period of time, the three of them didn't express anything about him watching. They didn't chase him away, nor did they secretly harm him. Of course, they didn't have good expressions either. 3 seniors. This mission is about to end. If we argue like this, I'm afraid our return trip will be delayed. The spiritual bodies behind us gathered for no reason. Along the way, they gathered more and became more and more violent. If an ignorant fellow Taoist accidentally provokes them, I'm afraid innocent people will be hurt. Although I have no virtue and no ability, I have a righteous heart. Why don't we stop here and sit down and talk? We don't have to fight to the death. It was best to persuade when the two sides were evenly matched. If one side had the advantage, there was no way to stop them unless you directly stretched out your hand. Then it would become a group fight. The ancient monk's moves were swift and fierce, and his Tao realm was unfathomable. He didn't fall into a disadvantageous position even when fighting 1 against 2. The 2 great cultivators in the Blight tier had deep cultivation. They were stable and shrewd, and they displayed the advantage of the experience they had accumulated over time to the extreme. They also didn't give in an inch. Lu Xiaoyi's interruption immediately caused the 3 to feel uncomfortable. If one wanted to persuade them to fight, one's status, strength, and reputation were indispensable. It wasn't something that an individual could casually stand out. You, a newcomer in the first Severance primordial divinity transformation who couldn't even be considered a true half-deity, suddenly stood out. However, the 3 of them had self-restraint and ignored him, allowing him to bark at the side, which made Lu Xiaoyi feel very bored. This wasn't the outside world, and he wasn't at his peak, so he didn't have the motive to use force. The 3 great cultivators were still the same, fighting endlessly. When they passed by a road sign, there was an accident. There was a set of rules for cultivators to place road signs on the wall of illumination. This didn't need to be taught. Those who could come here were all half-deities. Even if they weren't proficient in this, they could still understand most of it. Every time a half-deity came to the depths of the illumination realm, the end of the road sign system, if they had the intention and something useful, they would place a road sign on the periphery of this system to expand. The whole road sign system would then expand and eventually cover a very large area of the sky. The key was whether the half-deities had such an item in their hands. Of course, it was impossible to place natural spirit treasures everywhere. Not to mention natural spirit treasures, they couldn't even place acquired spirit treasures. Now, in the entire wall of Illumination Realm, other than the Leap 8 Heavens Cauldron, there were only 2 natural spirit treasures. Among these so-called items, the most common one was actually a very special kind of void beast. Chapter 2013. There were countless types of void beasts in the universe with all kinds of strange abilities. One of them was the stone anchor beast, which was famous for being lazy among the void beasts. But to what extent? If there was no fatal danger, it could spend its entire life sleeping on a spot in the void. That was why it was called the stone anchor beast. It was like a ship that was anchored. No matter how the universe changed, it would sleep on its own. The human cultivators used this characteristic of the stone anchor beast and placed it in the wall of illumination as a beacon. There were many benefits to it. It basically did not move, did not need to replenish its energy, and had a long lifespan. The only problem was that void beasts like the stone anchor beast were rare in the universe. It required some luck to catch one. There were a small number of such stone anchor beasts in the road sign system of the wall of illumination. However, there were different breeds of stone anchor beasts. Some of them were pure, while some of them had mixed bloodlines. The mixed bloodlines didn't mean that they couldn't stay. They were still lazy, but their aura wasn't like the pure stone anchor beasts. When there was a large amount of unstable aura around them, they would instinctively release their malice in their sleep. For example, a large number of vengeful spirit bodies could clearly sense the fighting aura of the human cultivators. However, they could not catch them no matter how hard they tried. When they lost control of their emotions, they passed by a non-pure stone anchor beast. In order to protect itself, the stone anchor beast released its threatening aura. It was like throwing a cigarette but into a methane pit. It immediately attracted the vengeful spirit bodies to attack it. The stone anchor beast characteristic was that it liked to sleep. However, its adult body had a high level of cultivation. If it was not so, it would not be placed here as a beacon. This was a gathering place for half-immortals. It was meaningless to place some monarch-level demonic beasts here. Although it was surrounded by hundreds of spirit bodies, the stone anchor beast body was stronger than fine iron. Its spirit power had no weakness due to its laziness. Therefore, it did not move under the attack of the vengeful spirit bodies. It was not a big deal. However, this form could not be maintained for long. When the number of vengeful spirit bodies exceeded a certain threshold, even real iron and stone would be transformed by the Tao state power of these spirit bodies. It was only a small portion of the resentful souls that had surrounded the stone anchor beast. Once the other souls that had followed the cultivators gathered, it would be the end of the stone anchor beast's lifespan. Obviously, the stone anchor beast was aware of this. No matter how lazy it was, it could not ignore the threat to its life. However, its ability was to stabilize itself. It was not fast enough, and its combat ability was also not good enough. This was the specialty of every void beast, and it was also one of the few void beasts in the universe that could coexist peacefully with humans. It couldn't run away, and if it fought, it would only attract more spiritual bodies. Although it was lazy, its brain hadn't completely turned into paste from sleep. It knew that the best response at this time was to completely conceal its aura. Therefore, after sending out a consciousness to the few human cultivators for help, it immediately fell into silence. The three cultivators were in a stalemate. In a split second, no one was willing to put themselves in danger for the sake of a stone anchor beast. In a different setting, without a fight, every inner and western scenic sky half-immortal had the obligation to help the stone anchor beast. After all, these void beasts were friends that humans had found to help human cultivators locate their positions. It was impossible to ignore them. However, the actual situation now was that who could guarantee that if they helped the stone anchor beast, their opponents wouldn't take advantage of the situation? Every cultivator had their own pride. In theory, cultivators with self-respect and self-respect would not take advantage of a situation like this. They should all help the stone anchor beast together, or one side would help while the other side would stop attacking. This was what a true cultivator should do. However, the great change of the universe was imminent, and there was no one here. It would be very naive to think of being a saint. It was difficult for them to reach an agreement in a short period of time. However, the vengeful souls surrounded the stone anchor beast very quickly. A large number of spiritual bodies would probably pounce on the stone anchor beast after 10 breaths. When that time came, even if they were strong, it would be difficult to save the stone anchor beast easily. For the cultivators, the only feasible method now was to let nature take its course. Although they were strong, they were still a big threat in front of a large number of spiritual bodies. The key was that the environment here would never stop extracting the cultivators' energy, making them lose the ability to fight a protracted battle that they were so proud of. Comparatively speaking, the loss of a marker and a stone anchor beast seemed reasonable and insignificant. At this moment, a ray of light bloomed in the void and converged into a river, instantly wrapping the spiritual bodies and the stone anchor beast inside. It was like a burning sacred fire. The Tao realm in the sacred fire was unpredictable. Even with their level of vision, it was difficult for them to distinguish it clearly. It was the combination of at least 5 types of Tao realm, and it had an unusually strong strangulation power against these spiritual bodies. This sacred fire came quickly and disappeared even faster. It only took a short breath from forming to extinguishing, but there was nothing in the void where the light disappeared. There was only a stone anchor beast that didn't dare to move. It was unharmed. It was not a fire, but an extremely dense sword light. Through extreme compression and expansion, and finally through creating spatial tears, it wiped out the existence of several hundred spiritual bodies at the same time. Spatial tears were a great power, and usually appeared when cultivators failed to create a spatial passage. But this swordsman was obviously more skilled, and could deliberately fail, completely wiping out the resentful spiritual bodies. This was definitely not a simple spatial ability. Spatial ability was only the last resort. Previously, he still needed to encircle the spiritual bodies, control them, and then stuff them all into the spatial passage, and then collapse the spatial passage at the right time. After doing all this, he still needed to control the fine details so that the stone anchor beast in the center would not be harmed at all. This kind of Tao realm operation, even if placed on them, these second severance, fourth severance, and fifth decay peak stage half-immortal cultivators, would be outstanding. This person actually had the ability to forcefully interfere with the progress of their battle of techniques. The 3 great cultivators were originally fighting fiercely, but the fire was naturally extinguished. This was the cultivation world, a place where elites could speak. Even if they felt that they might not lose to this person, a person of this kind of strength had spoken, and they had also been in the wrong for ignoring the stone anchor beast. Continuing to do as they pleased was not the conduct of great cultivators. They still needed to save face, especially under the reminder of a powerful force. The 3 of them withdrew their Tao realms, and each led the Yang spirit away, leading the resentful spiritual bodies that came one after another into the distance. It was a little awkward, and just as they did not know how to speak, they had not thought that the stone anchor beast would take the lead. Thank you, fellow Taoist, for resolving the problem. If I have the time, I am willing to share dreams with you. Chapter 2014. Sharing a Dream, Not Sharing a Bed. Since the stone anchor beast could reach the level of half-immortal, it was also a very rare species among the universe's void beasts. Of course, with their characteristic of sleeping for years in the void, they wouldn't be able to survive if they didn't have any special characteristics. However, their special characteristics were not in active attacks, but in other aspects. For example, since they liked to sleep, then they would naturally daydream. Dreaming was the main way they spent their lives, just like how humans lived and cultivated. Though they were lazy, they were cultivation creatures that paid great attention to their spiritual life. However, their dreaming was also a domain that was very difficult for outsiders to set foot in. For the vast majority of cultivators, there were not many chances of encountering stone anchor beasts in their lives. To be able to develop friendship, mutual trust, and be allowed to enter the dream together and enter the spiritual domain that solely belonged to the stone anchor beasts, It was very much about fate. It wasn't something that could be solved with small favors. Only someone like Lu Xiaoyi, who suddenly came from the bottom of his heart to help, could trigger their resonance. As half-immortal level cultivation creatures, they had their own unique way of distinguishing between good and evil humans. The stone anchor beast's goodwill was very tempting, but it was only tempting unless it was those very few cultivators who specialized in spiritual dream realms. No one would spend hundreds or thousands of years to nurture feelings with a stone anchor beast for this kind of experience. Lu Xiaoyi smiled slightly. What need is there to thank me? It's just that your cultivation level is not high enough, and you can't stabilize your state of mind. So you saw me attack. After a few more breaths, the three seniors won't just sit by and watch. You are willing to be a beacon for us humans, and we are all grateful. There is absolutely no reason for us to stand by and do nothing. He ate the ashes of the lanterns and let out a light fart. This was the highest level of conduct. As for whether the three seniors would attack or not, was it important? This attack had used up more than 10% of his origin power reserves in one go. After all, that was several hundred wisps of resentment spiritual bodies, a number that most half-immortals could only flee when they encountered. It was destroyed by him in one go, so the cost was not small. Fortunately, he had achieved his goal. The second severance, ancient monk chanted the name of Buddha. I'm ashamed. I've abstained from suffering and cultivated for many years, but I'm not as good at distinguishing between right and wrong as you, young friend. You don't have to flatter us. Since you couldn't resolve the stone anchor beast predicament at once, then there's a rift in your heart. There's no need to explain yourself. I already know who you are. When you return to the interior realm, you can come to the outline mountain for a chat. After he finished speaking, he did not stay any longer, nor did he try to reconcile with the two blight-tier great cultivators. The time for battle was no longer here. So he immediately left, fully displaying the decisiveness of an ancient technique, second severance, and not the slightest hesitation. This was the style of a half-immortal of the interior realm. He was straightforward and stubborn. It was impossible for him to shake hands and make peace with his opponent just because of Lu Xiaoyi's words. This was not like children fighting over candied haws in a small school, where they could reconcile with each other after a night's sleep. This was the cultivation world, where they were also fighting over Tao, and there was no way to reconcile them. The two heavenly Taoists of the exterior realm were not in such a hurry. The long years had taught them to let nature take its course and make friends. The five blights cultivator revealed a smile. Is it Inspector Liu? I've long heard that we've been at the wall of reflection for hundreds of years, but we haven't had the chance to meet. I'm a half-Fu, and he's Gu Taizhan. We are so old, but we're showing off our strength in front of the younger generation. We are really ashamed. We've made a fool of ourselves in front of Inspector Liu. Lu Xiaoyi bowed very respectfully. In front of these old demons, he was a true junior, less than 3,000 years old. In front of these old demons who were easily over 10,000 years old, it was not good for him to put on airs. This was the order of seniority buried deep in his heart. Moreover, it was not strange to be polite. Saying a few more nice words would not hurt him. So why not? It's healthier to fight. Actually, when it comes to showing off bravery, it's hard to find a second sect besides our sword vein in the cultivation world. It's just that my cultivation is not high enough, and I've been in here for too long, so I've changed from using my hands to using my mouth. And the three seniors have caused a bit of a ruckus. I am not biased, and am purely forming good karma. Half-Fu and Gu Taizhan laughed loudly. This Lu Xiaoyi was very honest. He did not deliberately say in front of them that they should work together to deal with Buddhism, because they were all Tao veins. Just like if they left, they would not say to the monk that they were all from the interior realm, so they would work together to deal with the exterior realm. Which great cultivator would be deceived by this kind of double dealing? At their level, things like orthodoxies, ancient techniques, and the deteriorating realm were not that important. In the process of cultivation, the circle of a cultivator was constantly changing. Enemies in the previous realm might have room to ease up now, and when they reach the next realm, they might have the opportunity to fight side by side. Who knows? Clinging to a certain circle and not letting go, thinking that it was perseverance. Such a philosophy was stupid. Just like the innate great Tao, many of them were used by Taoists and Buddhists. When the Tao realm reached the highest level, it would begin to show the interconnection between them. That was why there was the saying that if you understood one, you would understand all. If the two of them fought against the monk, it would be a long process to determine the victor. In fact, it was very meaningless. This long process would easily drag on until the end of the Wall of Illumination mission. Therefore, they were not fighting for life and death, but for ideals. If they were really fighting for life and death, they would not fight in a place like this. It's funny to say that the three of us are fighting for the demonic beasts. The most important thing is that the demonic beasts don't know that there are 3 human half-immortals who are fighting for them. Seriously speaking, these grudges are somewhat related to the enforcement tribunal. To be honest, Lu Xiaoyi's persuasion was more important because he wanted to get to know more half-immortals, those who were truly powerful among the half-immortals. He had already realized the importance of these people. To him, not only did he want to have the right to speak among the young half-immortals, these old peak half-immortals were also very important. He wanted to get to know these people and not participate in their schemes. Therefore, he was not interested in the reason why these 3 old fellows were fighting here. But from the words of this old Taoist, this matter was related to him. This was more mysterious. He was very good at stirring up shit, but he was far from being able to stir up shit in a situation where he did not know anyone. He could only reply, "Senior, what are you saying? To me, the 3 of you are just new acquaintances. How could this be related to me?" Half-immortal laughed. "The person is unrelated, but the matter is related. You know, although we are here on a mission, we are not unfamiliar with the things that happen in the exterior realm. We also have our own channels. The enforcement tribunal is only an enforcement tribunal because he went to the exterior realm to carry out a heartpan mission, right? The reason why we sent you interior realm people is because of the struggle of the immortals above. Actually, if you want to investigate, how can you compare to us exterior realm natives? After you left, the new exterior realm immortal monarch made a move. In the end, after investigating, the mastermind behind the exterior realm was revealed. How about it? Are you interested in knowing a thing or two?" Chapter 2015. This old guy was deliberately whetting his appetite. He didn't know what he was up to, but for Lu Xiaoyi, he really wanted to know. They had worked hard for several years in the exterior realm. Of course, he wanted to know the final reason, even if it was just to satisfy his personal curiosity. He smiled mysteriously. "Have you heard of the Celestial Fox Clan?" Lu Xiaoyi's heart skipped a beat. Of course, he had heard of the Celestial Fox Clan. Before going to the exterior realm, Olwen had joked that he could go to the secluded Fox Path to try his luck. Maybe he would have a romantic encounter. He really took Olwen's words as a joke. The investigation schedule was tight, and most of the time, he would be accompanied by his companions. Of course, he wouldn't have the opportunity to satisfy his desire for a romantic encounter, so he didn't have such thoughts. But now, Olwen said that the Heartplate incident was related to the Celestial Fox Clan. If all this was true, didn't it mean that Olwen's seemingly joking words actually had a deeper meaning? A mere monarch knew secrets that even he, a half-immortal, didn't know. It was as if there was nothing he didn't know. This in itself was extremely abnormal. It was getting more and more chaotic. The Celestial Fox Clan was a very special clan in the cultivation world of the universe. They were powerful, cunning, and deceitful. They were good at creating illusions and controlling people's minds. No one in the main world could resist their ability, including the most powerful sun spirit monarch. Millions of years ago, there was an incident where the Celestial Fox Clan wreaked havoc in the mortal world. Not only in one universe, but in many universes, it caused a devastating blow to the cultivation world of the human clan. Not only the human clan, but also most of the enslaved demonic beast clans. Later, these highly intelligent clans disappeared among the thousands of clans in the universe. Some said that they were exterminated by the way of heaven. Some said that the entire clan was imprisoned in a certain space. Now it seemed that these creatures were actually brought to an unspeakable place and raised in captivity. This was a secret that would never be known in the main world. Only when the universe changed, the era changed, and people's minds were in chaos, did people know about it. They had been trapped in a sea of clouds of spiritual vigor in the exterior world for millions of years. Human half-immortals could pass through this sea of spiritual vigor, but it was just a narrow path, like a narrow path in a vast forest. Although it was not long, they would be tempted by the endless temptations of those coquettish foxes. It was not only about love, but also about the great Tao, the upper realm, the immortal court, and the orthodoxies. Everything about the human being who insisted on staying true to himself would be led astray by the illusions of the heavenly fox clan. There were countless exterior-level half-immortals. For millions of years, no one had ever been able to walk that path with a sound mind. The heavenly fox clan didn't kill. They would only destroy your Taoist heart and everything related to your state of mind. When the heavenly fox clan had 9 tails, they would become immortal foxes, which was the same as the human immortal realm. Before that, the cultivation realm was a process of increasing the number of tails one by one. However, during the process of increasing the number of tails, it would not grow a new tail. Instead, the original tail would shed and grow more tails. No clan was willing to accept such a result of being raised in captivity. Of course, the intelligent heavenly fox clan was the same. They had worked hard for millions of years, tried all kinds of methods, and thought of all kinds of methods. However, under the suppression of the immortal court, they had never succeeded. Until 20,000 years ago, when the crow ancestor became an immortal, his dream finally came true. The crow ancestor played a role in this, but it involved the privacy of the immortal court. The specific exchange conditions, background, and transactions were unknown to ordinary people. Anyway, the heavenly fox clan was finally freed. They were arranged to settle down in a space in the main world and regain their freedom. However, there were still a few heavenly foxes left in the forest fox path of the exterior level heaven. They thought that it was a way to communicate with and control them. This was the change of the heavenly fox clan in the recent tens of thousands of years. Actually, it was deeply related to the crow ancestor. Therefore, Half-Fu said that whether it was the heart plate incident or the heavenly fox clan that had been dug out, it was related to the Xianyuan sword sect and Lu Xiaoyi. Such a statement was not without reason. There was more and more sh*t on his butt. Then, what does this have to do with the dispute between the seniors? Half-Fu sighed. The internal investigation of the exterior level heaven pointed to the heavenly fox clan. However, there was no concrete evidence. Even if there was, it was hidden in the hearts of the real bigwigs in the immortal realm and was not made public. Therefore, we can't conclude with this and do anything based on this speculation. The aftermath of the heart plate was actually more far-reaching than imagined because it meant the distribution of great Tao. On the eve of the change of the era, more and more cultivators have realized the role that the great Tao of the innate great Tao would play in this change of the universe. It could be said that it was decisive. Therefore, there were 2 factions. One faction wanted to continue the investigation, not only in the forest fox path of the exterior level heaven, but also in the habitat of the heavenly fox clan in the main world. The other faction wanted to stop the investigation and not escalate the matter and cause a dispute between the human and the monster clan. Lu Xiaoyi was very curious. So it became a disagreement between the inner and outer world. The inner world supported the investigation and the outer world supported the release. Half-Fu shook his head. It's not that simple. In the choice of great Tao, it's wrong to simply divide the inner and outer worlds. There are those in the inner world who hope to investigate to the end, but there are also those who try to smooth things over. It's the same for those in the outer world. You have to understand that there are circles everywhere in the cultivation world. You half-immortal freaks are one circle, Taoism is another, and Buddhism is another. Countless interests are combined, But in all the circles, there is a high-end circle with very high status. It includes all the second severance of the inner world, as well as the fourth and fifth severance of the outer world. Because of their respective positions in different fields, they are the true decision-makers of the entire half-immortal class. Lu Xiaoyi nodded. This was very normal. The reality was that he hadn't entered this circle yet, let alone played a role in it. Senior Half Fu and Senior Gu are also in it, right? Half Fu was helpless. You have to enter this kind of circle even if you don't want to, as long as your realm is there. You can't pretend to be noble and virtuous. Only in this kind of circle would you not miss out on some major events in the cultivation world, being abandoned and ostracized by the mainstream. The outer world Heaven's Heart Plate incident has already passed for more than 100 years, but the aftermath has never faded. Instead, as the change of the era gets closer and closer, it becomes more and more intense. It's just that it's not like that time with great fanfare, but more covert, with more undercurrents surging and more murderous. Lu Xiaoyi understood. What they care about is not whether the heart plate is right or wrong, but this kind of method of controlling and restraining the shards of great Tao. Chapter 2016. Hafu nodded. That's right. Therefore, there is no right or wrong in front of the great Tao. There is no distinction between the interior and exterior realms. There is no distinction between Tao orthodoxies. What is different is the philosophy of each cultivator. There is not much time left. There are fewer and fewer opportunities for everyone to slowly comprehend the Tao realm. If we don't seize it, there will be no more opportunities. People like us are conservative and old-fashioned. We focus on ourselves and firmly reject the influence of the external environment. Of course, there may be some other reasons. For example, the cultivators of the Soar Vein are not keen on this, but they're not because of their philosophy, but because the Heavenly Fox clan and your Crow ancestor are old friends. But on the whole, those who hold our view are only a minority. We are alone and weak. The Great Tao is the foundation of the competition. Under such circumstances, it's only natural that some of the more outrageous behaviors are taken for granted. Lu Xiaoyi sighed. He still had some hope. Fortunately, people like you can't go down in the main world for the time being, so it won't be too chaotic. Half Fu laughed. Enforcer, you are too restricted by the rules. It is true that the interior and exterior realms do not allow cultivators of the half-immortal realm to go down privately, but this is only the rule on the surface. If you really have the ability to go down, the higher-ups will not catch you now. They will turn a blind eye to the punishment. When the order collapses, the rules collapse first. Since there are no punishment measures, those who have the means will of course think of ways to take advantage of the loopholes. In other words, there are already cultivators of the half-immortal realm, but the number is very small, and no one dares to be too blatant. If you don't believe me, wait a few hundred years before the late period really comes. Groups of half-immortals will go down to the main world. Lu Xiaoyi was not surprised. No matter what happened in this cultivation world, he would not be surprised. The so-called early, middle, and late period of the change of the era could not be so clear. There would definitely be a period when the boundaries were blurred. He just didn't expect it to come so early, and it started with the strongest half-immortals among the group of half-immortals. It seemed that as the immortals of the immortal court gradually began to fall, there would inevitably be a shortage of manpower, and there would inevitably be loopholes in the control of the main world, especially the interior and exterior realms. He could already imagine how chaotic the cultivation world of the main world would be when there were very few immortals in the immortal court before the change of the era. So what could he do here? What would he gain? Banfa sighed. This kind of philosophy is different. Plus, there are some other conflicts. When it comes to the wall of mirrors, everyone is a little impulsive. Actually, it's nothing. We're different from that monk. We are willing to provide some information to the enforcer. We cannot guarantee that it is accurate, but it is indeed true in our circle. The Heavenly Fox clan's foothold in the origin world was on the Sorrowless Road, which was a very isolated place. In that case, let's leave it at that. Yu Gao, Zhou Chong, I hope that when we meet again, we can still be friends, and we can still reminisce about the past, and not be rivals in the struggle for the Tao. In this cultivation world, even us old people who have lived for tens of thousands of years can't tell who is a friend and who is a foe. It's a mess. The two Blight Realm cultivators bid farewell and left, leaving Lu Xiaoyi feeling lost. The future was clear, but it was also chaotic. He had to grasp the most crucial thing in such a chaotic situation, otherwise he would be abandoned by the times and would not be able to achieve the goal he wanted to achieve. He looked at the silent stone anchor beast and said with a smile, "Go to sleep. I may not have time to enter your dream. I am afraid that when I wake up, the change of the era will have passed." The stone anchor beast still did not give up. As a half-immortal creature, it also had its own principles of doing things. It was not willing to leave such a karma. With such a little concern, it would not be able to sleep well. "It's okay. It won't take up too much of your time. I won't really pull you into the dream, but I will show you several techniques to pull people into the dream. In the future, I dare not say that you will become an expert in entering dreams, but if others attack you in the dream, you will have a way to deal with it. I am the stone anchor beast, but this is a mistake of homonym. After a long time, I am too lazy to explain. Our real name is the time anchor beast. Being able to anchor time is the biggest feature of our dream. For humans, this is what they yearn for the most. So we would rather be called the stone anchor beast, so as not to attract too many people who want to chase after us. You know, if you humans are interested in any benefits, you will either be annoyed to death or be exterminated." Lu Xiaoyi was speechless, because what the stone anchor beast said was true. He also understood what this fellow meant. It wanted to end this karma on the spot. This was the nature of the stone anchor beast. This way of doing things was a little stiff, but he did not dislike it. It was much more practical than those who said that the mountains were high and the rivers were long, and that they would repay their debts later. After thinking it through and knowing that it would not delay the journey, he gladly agreed. He had already fallen into the trap of the path of dreams several times. Since he had this opportunity, it was also a good thing. If he only relied on himself to study this skill, firstly, he did not have the time, and secondly, he was not good at it. He opened his mind and connected with the stone anchor beast's consciousness. The next moment, his consciousness was pulled into a certain dream space. It was grotesque and inexplicable. There were countless graffiti-like drawings and lines, and there were strange birds and beasts everywhere. A dream was a projection of a creature's consciousness when it was awake. It was mixed into one's thoughts, hopes, goals, and feelings. It was also affected by many external environments and one's own situation. For example, when one was hungry, it was very likely that there would be delicious food in the dream. It was the kind that one could not eat no matter what, and one would wake up when it reached one's mouth. This meant that in the dream, the brain actually also received various signals from the body to a certain extent and reacted in the cerebral cortex. It was the same for the external environment. For example, the upper realm that cultivators yearned for, or the treasures that they dreamed of, or the secret manuals that they dreamed of day and night, or the woman that they dreamed of without eating or drinking, were going to Mount Wu together in the dream. Yes, this was horse racing, but this was the thought of humans, the dream of humans. Just like how humans could never understand a void beasts could never understand humans. The stone anchor beast dream directly messed up Lu Xiaoyi's mind. Fortunately, the stone anchor beast's intention was not really to let him experience its dream. What it wanted to show was the process of how to pull people into the dream. For cultivators who did not know the truth, everyone thought that the path of dreams was an independent spiritual path, but in fact, it was a variant of the path of time. It was also mixed with some other things, especially the exploration of the cultivator's past. This was the reason why Lu Xiaoyi was pulled back to Pu City time and time again. The root of the dream was time plus memory. The past memory mentioned here referred to the memory of one's life in this world and not the previous life. Chapter 2017. Dreams are the scenes and activities caused by various stimuli inside and outside the body or external stimuli left in the brain during sleep. Dreams are a kind of imagery language, and there's a great awareness, and later on, it is a great dream. The creation of dreams. When people are asleep, the brain cells also enter a state of relaxation and rest. But some brain cells are not completely rested, and weak stimuli will cause them to be active, thus causing dreams. For example, during the day, there's something that makes you very excited, and you are still thinking about it before you go to sleep. When the other nerve cells in the brain are resting, this part of the nerve cells is still excited, and you'll have a dream with similar content. As the saying goes, what you think about in the day, you will dream at night. Everyone dreams, and they dream every day. The difference is that when you are naturally awake, because of the short memory attribute of dreams, you will not remember the content of the dream, even if it is a terrible nightmare. Although you will still have an impression when you wake up, when you start a day of life and practice, this little bit of dream content will quickly disappear. If a person is directly awakened from REM sleep, they are more likely to remember the dream during that period of REM sleep. Dreams are not continuous, and the next dream will often quickly overtake the previous dream. You will always only remember the vagueness of the last dream, and then quickly forget it. This is the difference between open and closed eyes. What humans see, hear, and feel with open eyes can leave a relatively long memory in the cerebral cortex. However, when the consciousness is projected in the state of closed eyes, because there is no material object, it will often pass by, and the dream will not leave a trace. The former is a heavy carving in the cerebral cortex in the real world, and the latter is the sand in the wind. Nothing is left after it blows past. From a psychological point of view, dreams are a window that the conscious mind looks at the unconscious mind. Simply put, dreams are the satisfaction of the subconscious mind's desire. When a person is awake, they can effectively suppress the subconscious mind so that those desires that violate moral customs cannot do as they wish. However, when a person enters a state of sleep or relaxation, some desires will avoid the inspection of the subconscious mind and secretly surface on the conscious level, expressing themselves in various forms. This is the formation of dreams. Dreams were a substitute for human desire. It was the main way to release repression. In the form of fantasy, one could experience the instinctive satisfaction that one yearned for. The stone anchor beast used this method of constantly bringing him into and out of his dreams, allowing him to quickly understand the origin and creation of his dreams. This feeling was very novel. To be honest, he could not stand in such a clear perspective to look at his dreams. As long as a human has subconscious desires, including evil, righteous, ambitions, and ideals, as long as they have these, they will definitely dream. Unless you are a saint with no pursuit. Is there such a person in this world? It was impossible, so everyone had dreams. Dreams are the fallacies of natural evolution. They are the mistakes of nature when it created man. The dream was an untranslated ancient letter. Dreams are another part of life. Humans dream every day, but the difference is that those who know their dreams can observe their souls and benefit them for life. Those who do not know their dreams can still live without harm. Dreams are like this. They are generous and generous, but also stingy and stingy. The key lies with the humans themselves. The stone anchor beast did not say anything, nor did it teach him anything. In fact, with a completely different understanding of cultivation between humans and void beasts, the two races often have completely different views on the same matter, and they are irreconcilable. But it doesn't matter. What is important is that Lu Xiaoyi, as a human, has his own view on dreams. This is a test of a human's deep knowledge, insight, and judgment. However, as a half-immortal, Lu Xiaoyi does not lack wisdom. In the process of constantly analyzing how he entered his dreams, naturally, he also understood how those cultivators pulled him into their dreams. First of all, whether other people entered his dreams or pulled him into other people's dreams There's a kind of interaction of past memories, a process of spiritual resonance. In this regard, he does not have any defenses. This is because of his strong confidence in his own strength. However, in his previous life, he did not have any defenses because he was incomparably powerful in this life. So there's no need to waste energy to hide the past. However, in the nearly 3,000 years of past in this life, once he is pulled into a dream in a relatively special environment, there's a possibility that his body will lose the ability to deal with abnormalities. So far, his opponents have been fighting with him in the dream according to the rules. If there is someone who does not play by the rules, pulling you into the dream and using other means such as a battle pet, it will be very dangerous. To prevent this from happening, he has to disguise the memory storage in the cerebral cortex, or change the way these memories fluctuate. For mortals, this is simply unimaginable, but for a half-immortal cultivator like him, these specific operations related to the mind are much easier than tracing the past of his previous life. Because the goal is clear, it is just a matter of technique. For a cultivator with strong mental power like him, this kind of small control is a piece of cake. Cortical memory, resonance linkage, memory selection, karmic connection, death trap, and so on. With the stone anchor beast demonstration, the basic principle of how to kill in the dream is completely displayed in front of Lu Xiaoyi. It was not a specific method. It was impossible for a stone anchor beast to fully understand the strange ideas of human cultivators. However, he did not need to think about it at all. As long as the basic theory of the dream world was placed here, Lu Xiaoyi, who is also a human being, would naturally know where the loopholes were, what needed to be changed, and what needed to be strengthened. As far as the dream itself is concerned, this will never change. Perhaps Lu Xiaoyi will never learn how to invade other people's dreams, but it is not a problem for him to completely defend his own dream. He also does not need to learn how to kill in the dream. The sword is enough. He went in and out of the dream countless times, which is to say the stone anchor beast is proficient in this. Until Lu Xiaoyi can completely control his dream memory, he can control it seamlessly, and even the stone anchor beast can no longer pull him into the dream. This is a short and quick specialized skill learning, and it is actually learning from a void beast, which makes him feel a little incredulous. I'm leaving. Are you still going to sleep here? I just want to know, do you void beasts not care about the changes of the universe at all? Even if the change of era may have a huge impact on your life and cultivation, the stone anchor beast is indifferent. What are you worried about? We are born of a universe. Of course, we will change with the universe or die with the universe. Change is not scary. As long as we adapt to change, we will not be like you humans looking for trouble. We don't want to rule the cultivation world of the universe. Chapter 2018. P.S. I've finally completed a Golden Alliance for Chengwu Pin. Actually, it's far from enough. There's still a Golden Alliance and many other Milky Way alliances. I really can't add any more. Please take a break. Thank you, Chengwu Pin, for your support. It's a great fortune for a writer to have a reader who appreciates him. Everyone is already used to 4 chapters a day. But for the writer, it's hard to persevere under such pressure. Humans aren't machines. Even Old Fallen is only a semi-professional. In the next period of time, I might return to the rhythm of 3 or 4 chapters a day. I have to take a breather. Happy reading, everyone. Lu Xiaoyi floated away, but his heart wasn't as carefree as his figure. There were too many things to decide, so many that he couldn't differentiate between the important and the important. But there was one thing he was very clear about. He couldn't lag behind in his own realm. He couldn't lose the most fundamental thing just because he had to consider too many things. Otherwise, it would be a big joke if he didn't make the basic preparations when the era changed. However, his basic preparation was not to go into seclusion. Instead, it was to improve through endless events. For example, his trip to the mirror this time had solved the problem of the construction of the future and the problem of the insulation of dreams. These were things that could be seen and touched. In terms of vision, it was more broadened. His grasp of the direction of the future was clearer. These things couldn't be obtained through seclusion. Actually, looking at the cultivators of the same realm as demigods, very few of them were trapped in one place. They all understood that in this chaotic world of cultivation, opportunities and traps coexisted. All kinds of temptations came one after another. The probability of them falling was much denser than usual. The cultivators had to keep their eyes open, because there were too many hidden doors and traps in these opportunities. He had to warn his friends about this news. It wasn't good to spread it, but he had to inform the demigods of Yang God in the sword faction. Yes, and a few of the demigods who could really get along with each other, especially Qing Xian. This guy had amazing potential. He didn't want this guy to become an enemy for some inexplicable reason in the future. He needed a firm core group, because he didn't want to repeat the tragedy of Crow Ancestor. When he was a monarch, he had wavered in his state of mind. Should he focus completely on his own cultivation and fight against the entire system with his own strength? Or were they trying to form a clique and rely on the strength of the group? For this reason, he resolutely left Zhou Xian in the later stages of the attack and defense to pursue his own sky. But after hundreds of years of trekking, he realized that he had deviated from one extreme to the other. A collective force, like the Sword Soldier Army, was only suitable for cultivators below the half-immortal level in the cultivation world of the Origin world. It was impossible for those experts who were already in the upper realm of the half-immortal realm to use the same kind of power as they did in the Sword Vein. They were not the army, but the elite cultivators with flesh and blood. They would not be at the mercy of others, even their closest friends like Yin Shun and Qing Xian. If he respected them, he should give them freedom, not shout, "Brothers, demon blade sword formation." Then, everyone followed suit. Therefore, such a collective power was impossible to achieve in the immortal world, not to mention the complete pursuit of individual strength. With Crow Ancestor's example as an example, it was impossible for him to ignore it. Furthermore, in several great universe wars, it was proven that individual strength could not play a decisive role. While swaying like this, he gradually became clear about his path. Individual heroism was not desirable, and a complete military-style group power could not be achieved. In that case, he actually had a flexible way of doing things. That was to work hard to improve himself and, at the same time, to completely spread his reputation and prestige. When people thought of the half-immortal level, the first person they would think of was Liu Xiaoyi. With enough prestige, crushing strength, many friends, and a wide range of good karma. When facing a certain situation, he would use a certain interest that everyone was concerned about as a leverage point and make a call. This was the correct way to stir shit. In fact, he had been doing this subconsciously all these years. From contacting the various worlds of the universe to encircle and suppress the Hengi realm, to leading the way in the confrontation between the inner and outer realm, to cross-dressing at the women's conference, to controlling the overall situation in the Heartplate incident, to appreciating each other in Western Elephant Heaven and Buddhist sects Small Summer realm, and also to not rashly stand up for others in a fight, but mediate between them. All kinds of actions were subconsciously based on this concept. What he was reflecting on now was to make a deep analysis of what he was doing subconsciously. In the future, he would continue to do things according to this principle. That was why he felt that this trip to the inner realm was really worth it. In this way of thinking, he spent 2 years to return to the place where the empty divine magic conch should be. Ding Shan was still waiting for him there, with his very well-functioning counterfeit spiritual treasure. In a few years, the mission of our batch of exterior cultivators will be up. At that time, when we return to the exterior, do you have any words for me? Ding Shan was very perceptive. He knew that in the clouds of the sword vein in the exterior, there would definitely be elders from Xianyuan. Liu Xiaoyi handed the conch to him. Thank you for your kindness. If you can, tell those elders that if there's a chance, I'd still like to come down and visit my sect. Ding Shan nodded. He knew very well what Lu Xiaoyi meant. In fact, he meant to find a chance to return to his sect. It was just that he said it more tactfully. This was also a common problem for cultivators. Lu Xiaoyi thought for a while. This Ding Shan was not bad. There were some things that he should hint at. Fellow Taoist Ding, if one day there's a path to heaven in front of you that can help you take that step relatively safely, but the price is that you may not be the complete you, then would you still be willing? Ding Shan narrowed his eyes. He realized what Lu Xiaoyi wanted to say, but he couldn't say it directly. At their level, they understood this very well. They were only one step away from the immortal realm, so there were many things that they couldn't say carelessly. Lu Xiaoyi continued, "The universe is in chaos, and the era is changing. Fellow Taoist Ding, do you feel that there are suddenly more opportunities in the cultivation world? On the eve of the great change, everyone is used to it. It's the rhythm of change. Some people go with the flow and take advantage of opportunities to reach a higher level. Some people remain unmoved and stick to their original hearts. In fact, strictly speaking, there's no such thing as who's better than who. Well, that's all I have to say. We've met by chance, and we'll meet again someday." Lu Xiaoyi left without hesitation, but Ding Shan was bitterly thinking here. After all, he was an old man who had lived for tens of thousands of years. Although he couldn't guess the complete truth, he could at least grasp the meaning behind the swordsman's words. There were many opportunities now, but there might be real and fake among them. Therefore, there was no difference between accepting opportunities and completely cultivating by oneself. If the opportunity was fake, then there was a possibility of losing oneself, or losing a part of oneself. In this cultivation world, what could make these half-immortals lose a part of themselves? Other than those immortals in the upper realm, who else could it be? Ding Shan's expression began to become serious. He carefully recalled everything that he had done in the past 100 years and was shocked awake. This empty, divine magic conch had been hanging here for tens of thousands of years and had experienced the attention of countless cultivators. Was he the only one who coveted it? Impossible. The cultivation world wasn't clean to this extent. Then, was it because he was too outstanding? In the path of artifacts, there was no one before him that could surpass him in the future. Could he make a fake and pass it off as the real thing and deceive everyone's eyes? Impossible. Even if he was very conceited in the elite half-immortal class, he was at most in the upper middle class. How could he be considered outstanding? Then, why was he the only one who succeeded? Was it because of his own ability, or was it because of the magic conch's cooperation in a certain sense? Ding Shan quietly stood in the void. After a month of silence, he finally made a decision. Chapter 2019. Actually, there was no right or wrong in telling the truth to someone like Ding Shan. He would still retain his own consciousness, but he would be possessed in the Tao state. It didn't seem to be a big deal. If there were 100 demi-immortals, and he told them that there was a more promising path, that they would be slowly abducted by the original owner of the Tao state, but would they still be completely independent? Would they still be willing to take this path? Probably more than half of them would choose to do it without hesitation. It all depended on a cultivator's moral cleanliness. Some people would rather die than submit, while others had no scruples. They couldn't unify their views on this matter. This was the brilliance of the immortal's possession. But Lu Xiaoyi kept thinking, if the Tao state is really controlled and becomes the original owner's Tao state, will other things really not change? Who can say for sure? Who can guarantee you? A few months later, Lu Xiaoyi rushed out of the wall of mirrors and immediately recovered. This kind of situation could be found everywhere. These silent cultivators all did the same. They recovered, entered, and came out again to recover. His consciousness mobilized faith in an attempt to contact the heavenly eyes. This wasn't a necessary procedure after every heavenly eyes mission. But Lu Xiaoyi realized that this mission came from the heavenly eyes spirit treasure lord, which was the only heavenly spirit treasure he could come into contact with. But this layer of gauze was not broken. Lord Linglong also appeared in the image of Taoist Haiyan. In the cultivation world, this meant distance. If the other party didn't take the initiative, he couldn't break through this layer of window paper. But in any case, contact was possible. Lord Linglong was probably the only one among the four mortals of the heavenly eyes who could talk to him. His purpose was firstly to gather information, and secondly, to return. The Wall of Mirrors was a remote place, so it wasn't very convenient. Although he had other methods, such as transferring to the exterior realm, or waiting a few years to hitch a ride with the interior realm cultivators. Lord Linglong satisfied his request and set up a white light to open a passage for him. When he appeared, he found himself near the fifth ring, but not near Qin Kong. His request was to return to Qin Kong, but Lord Linglong sent him back to the fifth ring. This was the question and answer of the cultivation world. Lu Xiaoyi asked, "Can I go over and ask for your advice?" Linglong replied, "I'm busy, not free." He did not want to pursue the reason. Besides, he knew that a numinous treasure immortal lord would probably not answer his question. What he wanted to ask was, were there any deaths of connate numinous treasure immortal lords and demonic beast immortal lords? This could be a very awkward question. However, to a certain extent, it would affect the changes during the epic change. It was hard to imagine that when the human immortals in the immortal court were almost wiped out, there were still a large number of spiritual treasures and demon beasts. If that was the case, even the least ambitious numinous treasure clan would have their own ideas. So, there must be some way to balance it out. He was meddling a little too much. However, if he could understand these changes more clearly, he would be able to provide a basis for his future actions. He was a little anxious. In the space outside the fifth ring, Lu Xiaoyi was somewhat hesitant. He needed to go back and give some suggestions to the sect, but he was also worried that he would be unable to leave the position of sect leader once again. In the end, his sense of responsibility prevailed over his selfishness. On Crow Peak, several Sun God swordsmen sat in a circle with Yin Peng. That's about it. To be honest, I can't expect everyone to dislike this method just because I don't like it. A cultivator's life is inseparable from external forces, including not only external objects, but also opportunities. Strictly speaking, the appearance of external forces changes the cultivator's body, including me and all of you here. So, even if we are now, are we still the original us? Who can say for sure? What should we be like in the past? Unless you have been completely relying on yourself since the day you started cultivating, without opportunities, treasures, or even a sect, because you are likely to learn and become the Crow Ancestor or Xianyuan the Great. Then, are the Crow Ancestor and Xianyuan the Great try to possess us? Everyone fell into deep thought. Lu Xiaoyi's reminder was really ambiguous. Everyone had their own interpretation. There was no need for everyone to have their own answer. When they had the chance to meet, they would naturally choose from their hearts. Stop while you can. Going too far is as bad as not going far enough. It depends on the time, the place, and the person. The reason why I added this is that the immortal tribulation this time is universal. It is organized and has a purpose, relying on this to take advantage of the east wind and reach a higher level. When your wings are fully developed, you will decide whether to take or keep it. This is one method. Being independent, regardless of where the wind blows, the heavenly Tao is endless, and you only have one's heart. This is also a method. This is a question that will never have an answer. To be honest, I am also in a dilemma. Guandu asked, "If junior brother has to choose, how will you choose?" Lu Xiaoyi chuckled. "I don't have such an absolute ego." Well, actually, I think it's better to use a villain's method for this kind of thing. Guandu was puzzled. What do you mean by a villain's method? Lu Xiaoyi smiled. I think that if it's the opportunity of a golden immortal or a zenith heaven golden immortal, then it's better to swallow it in one go. As for whether senior brother will be Guandu or a great Tao master in the future, that's actually not important. What's important is that the Xianyuan sword sect has another golden immortal to rely on. If it's the opportunity of a human immortal or a perfected immortal, then there might not be much of a need. Moreover, their methods might be cruder and the repercussions might be more serious? Guandu was speechless. Your way of thinking is really villainous. So what you're saying is that if the pie in the sky is big enough, we should sacrifice ourselves for the sect? Guandu retorted, every one of us is willing to die for the sword vein. We're not afraid of death, so why should we be afraid of the opportunity of a golden immortal? Compared to death, isn't this method thousands of times better? Guandu snorted. That's different. One dies for the freedom of the sword, and the other lives for the narrowness of the Tao. From a human's point of view, their natures are different. Clearly, there were already different thoughts among the highest echelons of Xianyuan. Lu Xiaoyi would not let everyone vote. This was something that should not be unanimously agreed upon. Smokey pursed his lips. Little E, you only know how to use these nonsensical and messy paradoxes to affect everyone's state of mind. Actually, I think that we should just let nature take its course. Walking on two legs, some walk on the open path, some walk on the dark path. There's no need to unify our views. Moreover, I think that for something like this, the ones who should really consider it carefully should be those Taoists and monks. Forgive me for being blunt, but the golden immortals of our sword vein might not take a fancy to us. In such a big universe, there are only a few spots. Even those with 5 rings and great reputations might not be able to get a turn. Yet, you guys are here discussing whether we should accept or not. Aren't you guys worrying too much? Stop here and don't mess up your state of mind. Chapter 2020. Lu Xiaoyi had achieved his goal of reminding them. The whole process came to an abrupt end with Smoke Puppet's intervention. In this regard, Smoke Puppet's cultivation experience was indeed very rich. You can listen, but you can't take it seriously. This was the correct attitude. In this gathering, the only tacit agreement was the recognition of the general trend of the universe. In the main world, there would not be any large-scale cosmic wars. The more demi-immortals there were, the less likely it would be. This was because the demi-immortals had entered the stage of dog biting dog. This was also the judgment of the entire 5th ring. Therefore, it was meaningless to tie the only 2 demi-immortals in the sword faction to the sect. They should go out. Every cultivator at different realms had their own stage. Don't mix with each other. There was no way to play. After the gathering, Lu Xiaoyi and Smoke Puppet stood at the top of Crow Peak. The clouds were thick and heavy, and the wind and snow were coming, just like the current trend of the universe. I'm going to Wuchou Road. That's the territory of the Heavenly Fox clan. Recently, some disputes may involve them. Senior sister, you know that the more chaotic the universe is, the more people will pay attention to the so-called righteousness of cultivation. The more vicious they are, the higher they will raise their flags. This is the so-called orthodox, mainstream style. Smoke Puppet understood what he meant. That Li Weia has nothing to do with the Heavenly Fox clan. It's purely the result of his thinking. In the end, after 20,000 years, we still have to wipe the slate clean for him. After Li Weia became an immortal, he removed his morals. At that time, he proposed very few conditions, and he did not mention a word about the future of the sword vein. This was not cold-heartedness. In fact, it was to protect the sword vein. However, among his limited conditions, the most eye-catching one was the release of the Heavenly Fox clan, freeing them from millions of years of captivity. This was a historical event that everyone knew about. Because of this, countless beautiful legends of the swordsman and the Heavenly Fox were created. However, legends were only for the lower class. During the great changes in the universe, this could also be a reason for the mainstream of cultivation to attack the sword vein. Your ancestor of the sword vein released the Heavenly Fox clan, and what happened? Did something happen? The Heartplate incident had killed so many Tao enlightened elites. How should this debt be settled? It wasn't that the sword vein had to compensate for anything. Instead, it would become a fuse that would stop the sword vein's character from progressing further. This sounded a little ridiculous, but the higher you went, the more you had to wash your face clean. No one would be able to get a handle on him. Therefore, this was not a small matter. It might affect the distribution of benefits before and after the change of the era. Are you coming with me? Lu Xiaoyi was looking forward to it. He had never gone on a mission with Senior Sister before, especially after everyone's cultivation levels had increased. Moreover, he didn't want Senior Sister to be cooped up at home. Smoky Ant glanced at him. Of course, he knew what he was thinking. Whether he wanted to take him out to relax or to try his luck, it was still a kind gesture. No, only you can clean up Li Wuya's mess. I've already set my schedule. I'm going to Heaven's Choice Continent to take a look and deal with some personal matters. Lu Xiaoyi nodded. He didn't insist. Actually, every half-immortal schedule was full. There were countless things to do. Smoky Ant's goal of going to Heaven's Choice Continent was very clear. First, it was for the reincarnation tablet. Second, it was for the Sword Dao tablet. This was a very normal choice. Her Dao was reincarnation. As for the Sword Dao tablet, it was the holy land in every Xianyuan swordsman's heart. Actually, Lu Xiaoyi was slowly understanding why the Crow ancestor wanted to place the Sword Dao inheritance in Heaven's Choice Continent. It was to not cause unnecessary trouble for the sword faction. It was also to encourage the Xianyuan swordsmen to go out more. In Heaven's Choice Continent, other than the Sword Dao tablet, there were many other innate Dao tablets that could broaden one's horizons. The reincarnation Dao will not collapse early, because if it collapses, it means that the reincarnation cycle will become chaotic. There will be many unexpected accidents. I believe that the heavenly Dao will not allow too many of these accidents to happen. It will destroy the balance of cultivation. Therefore, Senior Sister, you should still have plenty of time. I have some relations with the Taoists and Buddhists of Heaven's Choice Continent. Writing a letter will be easy. Smoky Ant snorted. No need. I don't believe that I can't go in by myself. Lu Xiaoyi smiled. Who dares to stop Senior Sister from going to the place you want to go? Blind as dog eyes. But Senior Sister, the current heaven selection is different from the past. Cultivators from all over the universe are gathering there. Everyone knows that the innate Dao tablet is one of a kind. Who knows when the Dao tablet you like will be gone? So the crowd is not something you can imagine. The last time I went to Heaven's Choice Continent, I met a few acquaintances from Zhouxian. At that time, the price of entering the tablet was already over 10,000. A few days ago, I heard people say that because there were too many guests, even ordinary true monarchs were not qualified. The lowest level was the Sun Spirit. There were also many half-immortal freaks. The price has increased a few times. Senior Sister, do you think I don't know you? You're poor. Dafa, your storage ring is cleaner than your face. With your little savings, I'm afraid you can only enter the innate Dao tablet. Don't try to borrow the spirit from me. Recently, my Sun Spirit Ascension is also very expensive. Moreover, even if we add up all the money in our pockets, it may not be enough to enter the tablet once. Can we not pretend to be virtuous? If we don't use our acquaintances, these old guys won't be able to last for many years. It will be a huge loss. Smoky Ant pouted and did not say anything more. She was a swordsman half-immortal. How could she not be able to enter the innate Dao tablet in Heaven's Choice Continent? It was nothing more than a matter of entering the innate Dao tablet. However, little E had good intentions. He did not want her to waste time on the details. This was very different from Li Wuya. Li Wuya was really carefree. If he did not allow you to enter, he would encourage you to fight your way in. Lu Xiaoyi, on the other hand, liked to make arrangements, especially for the people around him. He showed a rare attention to detail among cultivators. This could be seen from the news he brought back when he returned to the dome. If it were Li Wuya, he would not have said this kind of ambiguous news at all. He would let you figure out yourself. However, Lu Xiaoyi knew that it was nonsense, but he still said it. They were two completely different styles. However, there was one thing. These two people were extremely daring. They did not respect the heavens, were not afraid of the strong, and were unscrupulous. Li Wuya's personal temperament was unparalleled. He played the tragic role of a lone hero to the extreme, causing countless beauties to fall head over heels for him, including the phoenix and the heavenly fox. However, Lu Xiaoyi rarely did things his own way alone. Everything could be discussed. He always stood on the side of righteousness. He also had friends from all walks of life to help him. Even the United Women's Alliance was his fan club. However, if you thought about it carefully, you would realize that no matter how many suggestions and opinions you gave, in the end, you would still unconsciously follow his path. She often sighed secretly. How lucky she was to be able to meet two such outstanding people in several lifetimes of cultivation. Her life was perfect. Chapter 2021. Lu Xiaoyi was usually very relaxed when he was with Senior Sister. His mood was uninhibited, and he didn't hold back when he spoke. Senior Sister say innate Daos are crumbling one by one, followed by post-celestial Daos. Then, will Ancestor Crow's Sword Dao tablet crumble? When will it crumble? This was a taboo question. In Xinyuan Sword faction, no one dared to mention it. But Lu Xiaoyi didn't care. Yanqing also didn't care because of his special identity. He had already left. What about the Sword Dao tablet? It'll crumble sooner or later. And I'm sure that the Sword Dao tablet won't be the one to last. So I have to go earlier. What kind of Dao concept does Li Wuya's Sword Dao tablet have? With the current Dao situation, it's already out of my expectations that it didn't crumble at the very front. Why, do you have any ideas? Lu Xiaoyi shrugged. What ideas can I have? I'll just rebuild it after it crumbles. How big of a deal is that? My opinion is the same as Senior Sister's. It's better to crumble earlier and not attract attention. We don't have to make ourselves stand out from the masses in these minor matters. Senior Sister, when you go to the Heaven's Choice tablet, you have to go to the last few stages to see if there are any bad signs. That way, you can be mentally prepared. Actually, there were many people in Xinyuan Sword faction who were worried. No one was an idiot. This change in the universe obviously wouldn't leave behind any post-celestial or post-celestial Daos. It was a huge reshuffle. Therefore, when the sword faction loosened its control, 9 out of 10 swordsmen with the ability to travel, true monarch and above, went to the Heaven's Choice continent. This included not only Supreme Luminous Brilliance and Yin Dai, but also those from the Sword Soldiers' army who had been there once. As the guides, Song Rong, Zhou Fan, and the others felt that now that their swordsmanship had undergone a drastic change, it was necessary for them to further their studies. This was because their previous studies were still too superficial. Basically, they had only dabbled a little and needed to be retrained. The Heaven's Choice continent became the most popular check-in place in the universe. Cultivators from all over the 3 realms and 9 domains flocked here, causing the enormous Heaven's Choice continent to become crowded. The conditions to enter the various innate Dao tablets increased by more than a few times. Fortunately, the Sword Dao tablet had a special requirement for the orthodoxy, so it was not crowded. This was also a secondary benefit for the swordsmen. Now that the Heaven's Choice continent was in such an orderly state, there were disputes everywhere. Everyone came with a goal for the innate Dao tablet, which was getting fewer and fewer. It was also a very good training environment. Here, one could come into contact with different orthodoxies from the entire universe. In fact, even without the Dao tablet, it was an excellent place to broaden one's horizons. This time, the upper echelons of the Heaven's Choice continent had a very good grasp of the universe. They opened their hearts wide and welcomed guests from all walks of life. Of course, whether or not you could enter the Great Dao Monument in the end would depend on your own ability. They only needed to provide a relatively fair rule. The direct result of this was that the universe's cultivation world no longer excluded the Heaven's Choice continent for the mainstream cultivation world. Instead, they were officially accepted as a member. The integration was very successful. They were also not worried about the problem of the external forces of Heaven's Choice increasing. When the epoch changed and the main and reverse universes merged, the Heaven's Choice continent was destined to cease to exist. Why should they care about it now? Completely integrating into the mainstream cultivation world and no longer being collectively targeted by the main world's cultivators was their greatest gain. Sharing with Yin Mu the experience of Xinyuan Senior's heaven transformation of the exterior in the pavilion was the most important thing for her. Smoker was magnanimous and did not hesitate at all. She left as soon as she said she would, but before she left, she warned him. Little Li, Liwia can't control his private life. Don't learn from him. When the time comes, you will create a lot of unnecessary trouble for yourself. Those heavenly foxes are very flirtatious. Are they easy to provoke? If I hear any rumors after this, be careful that my boss will slap you. Lu Xiaoyi looked at his senior sister's graceful figure disappearing into the horizon. He was completely unconcerned. According to his logic, since he had already provoked the heavenly fox race once, why not do it again? At least it was better than provoking other races, right? What could happen? Even if something really happened, he could use Crow Ancestor as a scapegoat. This was where the value of a senior lay. Heavenly Fox, he had admired him for a long time. In fact, what he envied the most about Crow Ancestor was his unrestrained style of doing things. From his autobiography, he was truly fearless and full of vigor. Moving freely, he could eat his fill and the whole family would not be hungry. He could not learn it, not only because of his personality, but also because of the environment. Crow Ancestor did not have the collapse of the heavenly axiom and the change of eras. The situation in the universe was not as chaotic as it was now, and everyone was anxious. Therefore, there was a premise of indifference when it came to doing things. The most important thing was that no one left a piece of shit for Crow Ancestor before this. There were also no top forces in the celestial world or the human realm watching and being on guard. Unlike Lu Xiaoyi now, he had to be careful not to be targeted by the higher-ups at all times. This was because Xuanyuan Sword Vein was on the blacklist of every top force in the cultivation world of the universe. He could not act unrestrainedly like Li Wuya, which would lead to the most direct elimination. He had to be very sociable and blend in with the Taoists and Buddhists. He had to be a leader who could represent everyone's common interests instead of being a personal threat. Nothing came for free. He also knew very well why the mainstream tolerated someone like him. There was no other reason. When the birds were gone, the bow would be put away. When the cunning hare was dead, the hound would be cooked. This was the real reason why Lu Xiaoyi could sit in this position and have the ability to summon wind and rain in the mainstream cultivation world of the universe. This was because it was very difficult for the big forces behind them, the orthodox Taoists, the direct descendants of Buddhism, and the unorthodox giants, to find someone who was so powerful and charismatic that they could take the blame and set up after the event and abandon the sacrifice. They praised him so highly in order to achieve the transformation of the new and old forces in the distribution of benefits. When this process was over, it would be the end of Lu Xiaoyi. However, what they did not know was that Lu Xiaoyi's ultimate goal was not to become a golden immortal or Daluo golden immortal. He wanted these people to support him so that they would never be able to remove the ladder. They would have to support his smelly feet until the end of time. Of course, there were also many who sincerely treated him as a friend. He could not kill them all. He knew who was a friend and who was just putting on a show, but he could not show it. He had to maintain his persona, a somewhat clever guy who liked to pretend to be weak, good at stirring up trouble, good at showing his face when he encountered trouble, and a shallow guy who was complacent about his position. Everyone would like such a swordsman. He was a person who was willing to entertain everyone and did not mind becoming a popular cultivation world. He wanted to turn the entire cultivation world of the universe into his personal mess. Who knew what kind of benefits he would receive then? Chapter 2022. He was not in a hurry to leave, because he had no idea where Macho Road was. When the Immortal Court was looking for a place for the Heavenly Fox clan to settle down in the main world at the request of the Crow Ancestor, they obviously considered the factor of isolation. They still did not want the Heavenly Fox clan to regain their original nature, even if it was only in theory. Just in case, the Immortal Court found such a legendary place. Many people had heard of it, but very few people knew its exact location, including the Xianyuan Sword Vein, whether it was the highest ancient books of the sect or the old Yang spirit cultivators like Guanshan and Guandu, but he knew that there must be someone who knew the location of this place. And it was right in front of him. Since he had a favor to ask, he could not go empty-handed. Carrying a ring of the best cigarettes in the fifth ring, Lu Xiaoyi felt that his concept of time and space was a little confused, as if he had returned to a certain era when he used connections to get in through the back door. It was just that in that era, cigarettes were given in a few cartons, but here, it was a ring. A storage ring was not a small number. In this world of cultivation, cigarettes and wine were separated, because the value of wine did not depend on its age. In the world of cultivation, there were many wines that were more than 1,000 years old, and there were even wines that were more than 10,000 years old. But in that world, wines that were more than a few decades old were treated as family heirlooms. Here, they were talking about quality. Wine was like that, and so were cigarettes. The Crow ancestor was also the ancestor of cigarettes in the world of cultivation, but after 20,000 years, Xianyuan was no longer the leader of cigarette production, because there were too many orthodoxies that were more capable than the sword vein in the production of utensils, especially when there was a profit involved. In the production of cigarettes, the only taboo was that it could not be promoted to mortals because mortals did not have the ability to resist the smoke poison. Lu Xiaoyi was now carrying the best brand of cigarettes in the fifth ring, the Crow brand cigarettes. Whether it was the choice of materials or the production process, they were all excellent. In fact, this was also the reason why mortals could not afford it, because the currency system of the two worlds was not universal at all. Old man, I'm here to see you. Look what I brought you. If you don't court death, it's enough for you to smoke for 100 years. Lu Xiaoyi shouted as he pushed open the courtyard door. Hearing that the old Taoist priest was happy and content, he leaned back on the reclining chair. The messy farm tools around him showed that he was an incompetent farmer. Fortunately, he had never been afraid of this. Unhurriedly, he glanced at Lu Xiaoyi, looked at the things in his hands, and snorted. A weasel paying a visit to a chicken. I'm afraid you're up to no good. Lu Xiaoyi happily lifted the cigarette. How about I massage your legs for you? Wenji narrowed his eyes. Don't give me that. This old man has experienced countless things. Aren't your bootlicking skills a little too careless? Speak, why have you come? You know my rules. I only answer your questions and don't move. There are countless secrets in the universe, and this old man only knows a little about them. I can't answer anything that's too remote. Lu Xiaoyi chuckled. Don't worry. How would this junior dare to trouble senior with something too obscure? It's all the past that you mentioned. It's not out of the circle. Well, you told me about the 2 earths and 3 roads, right? I won't hide it from you. I've been to the odd pure land of the 2 earths, and I've just returned from the Yellow Springs road of the 3 roads. Isn't it just the wall of reflection? You said that you were shrouded in fog. I just want to know, where's this macho road? Senior, can you give me a hint? When Ji closed his eyes again. You're very agile. You've already gone to 2 places that others can't go in their entire lives. It seems that you're living a very fulfilling life. Although he said it perfunctorily, he was surprised in his heart. Needless to say, the Yellow Springs Road was the easiest of the 3 roads. Basically, all the inner and outer scenic sky cultivators had to go there. It was nothing. However, he could go to the odd pure land. This matter was fishy. Relatively speaking, the ancient sullied earth was easier. It was easy for others, but he happened to be in the middle. And this macho road, I seem to know a little about it in my memory. It's a pity that it's been a long time, and some of it isn't true. I can't recall it clearly for the time being. Once a person gets old, his memory is not good. He also likes to listen to stories, especially about other people's adventures and travels. Once he listens to it, maybe he can remember something. Lu Xiaoyi sighed. This old man only had this hobby. He liked to listen to other people's stories, especially the stories that happened in the process of traveling. You said that your cultivation was not low. If you like traveling, then go and experience it yourself. He didn't like it. He liked to listen to other people's stories. What was wrong with him? It was like he liked to watch other people get married, and he was infinitely satisfied at the side. He could only say it. Moreover, he was different from other people. Other people's situations were shallow, and didn't involve much. They treated everything as a secret and weren't willing to share it with others. In the cultivation world, this was a good habit. However, Lu Xiaoyi was the opposite. He dared to say anything and never cared about those so-called secrets. This was because he understood a principle very well. The more you wanted to know, the more honest you had to be, especially for this incomparably mysterious old man. Other than his own cultivation core, this old man wasn't interested in these things. This was because everyone's path was different, and there was no comparison. However, in his experiences, he didn't hide them. Moreover, there were countless private goods, complaints, judgments, and malicious speculations about the upper echelons. This made Old Man Wenji break out in cold sweat. He felt that if he were the heavenly Tao, the first thing he would do was to pinch this guy to death. It was really too dangerous. However, it was also because of this danger that he enjoyed it. This was his character and also his Tao. He used the human's cultivation journey to sharpen himself and always thought about what he would do after encountering such a situation. Unfortunately, it seemed that he had never stepped on the same point as this little guy. It seemed that stirring shit also required talent. Ordinary people really couldn't stir it up. For example, this guy was now speaking with assurance. You say, the immortal court is already like this. It can't be just humans, right? Can demonic beasts escape? Can spiritual treasures escape? Immortals collapsed with the great Tao. What about demonic beasts and spiritual treasures? Are they following the great Tao? Or the cosmic phenomena? Or something else we don't understand? Can they be reconciled? Humans are not reconciled. They have countless backup plans and long-term arrangements. Then, what are the arrangements for demonic beasts and spiritual treasures? Are they targeting their own kind? Or are they also related to humans? When Ji felt that he couldn't let him continue these unconstrained and lawless ideas, even if he actually knew very well, now was not the time to tell him everything. He had lived for too long, and this was the first time he heard a story that could make his heart skip a beat. Well, it's very exciting and inspiring. I seem to have remembered something. Chapter 2023. The Wuqiu Path. You can't find it even if you travel through thousands of realms. When you can't find it, the stars look back. I'm talking about the Wuqiu Path. It's a magical place. Since you've been to the Odd Pure Land, you should know that the universe is vast and full of wonders. The Wuqiu Path is a place that's similar to the Odd Pure Land. It's not just a location. It's a place that's closely related to a cultivator's state of mind. I heard you say that you've been to the small Sumeru realm in the western elephant sky. Since you've been there, you should know about the world within the small Sumeru realm. Based on the way to find the Macho Path, it seems to be a place where the mystical Pure Land and the small Sumeru realm combine. This old Taoist had been to the western elephant sky. How did he get there? If one wasn't a half-immortal, they wouldn't be able to use the inner and outer scenic skies. Just flying alone would take thousands of years. The old Taoist had accidentally let slip some information, but Lu Xiaoyi didn't expose him. It wasn't time yet. You've been talking for so long, but I still don't understand. When Ji glanced at him, let's talk about the mechanism first, then the route. If I don't explain it in advance, I'm afraid you won't be able to understand. In terms of actual location, the Wuqiu Path is the same as the small Sumeru realm. It's also within the inner space of the dimension. However, its laws are connected to the main world. It's like a huge hole dug by the main world in the inner space of a dimension. You've been to the small Sumeru realm, so you should know. Lu Xiaoyi nodded. Indeed, it's a magical place. When Ji pretended to be profound, the key is how to find the location. It's not like the small Sumeru realm, which is fixed in a certain position in the western elephant sky. Instead, it's illusory and not fixed. It's something more emotional, like the Odd Pure Land. You need to use your heart to feel it. When you establish a connection with it, the entrance may be right beside you. Lu Xiaoyi was even more speechless. You mean, I can feel its existence in this small courtyard of yours? When Ji snorted, if you become an immortal in the future, it may be possible, but you can't do that now. You need to go to the void of the universe and murmur the name of a certain heavenly fox. Only then can the other party feel it and establish a connection. Only then can you determine the space to open the passage and reach the worryless road. Lu Xiaoyi joked, "Why don't you just say that it's a guest calling for you? And it's another matter if the host opens the door or not." When Ji ignored him, "This is a method suitable for cultivators who have a relationship with the Heavenly Fox clan. As for the second method, if you have the tail of the Divine Fox, you can also roughly feel the path." The Divine Fox has stayed in the secluded path of the Heavenly Forest Fox for millions of years. Although it rarely gives out its foxtail, it has accumulated some over time. In those ancient great orthodoxies, it is not difficult to borrow a foxtail. However, I guess you people in Xinyuan don't have it. Although your crow ancestor has an unclear relationship with the Divine Fox clan, it doesn't seem to have accepted such a gift. Lu Xiaoyi knew that what Wen Ji said was true. The crow ancestor was such a person. He was pretentious, and the last thing he wanted to do was to talk about relationships based on a thing. People like him didn't need to do that at all. However, the problem was that he didn't go to the secluded path of the Heavenly Forest Fox when he was in the exterior. He didn't know any Heavenly Fox at all. "Do you have a foxtail? Or, if you have a familiar name of a heavenly fox, I can borrow it from you." Wen Ji shook his head. "Childish. The Heavenly Fox clan has a deep taboo about their own names. In fact, all demonic beasts are the same. You've been cultivating for so many years. How many big demons do you know the real names of? You can't reveal it to anyone who is not close to you. I know, but it's two different things for me to tell you and for it to tell you. If you tell it, it's useless even if you shout your throat out in the universe. As for the fox's tail, do you think a heavenly fox would fancy someone like this old man?" Lu Xiaoyi took the opportunity to light a cigarette for the old man. "If they don't like it, it's their loss. They don't have good taste. So you've been talking to me for so long, but it's useless? Is there an ordinary stranger who wants to travel to the Wuchou Road? I don't believe it. The Heavenly Fox clan was only placed on the Wuchou Road 20,000 years ago. Before that, how did others get in?" Wen Ji took a deep breath of the cigarette and said calmly, "So, the third way I'm going to talk about now is the way you guys with bad intentions go to the hometown of the Heavenly Fox clan, the secluded path of the Heavenly Fox clan. There are no Heavenly Fox clan there now. It has been millions of years, but the connection between the Heavenly Fox clan and their hometown will always exist. Unless the era changes and the universe changes, this connection will not change. Then, try your luck there. Sooner or later, you will always find the signs of the Wuchou Road." Lu Xiaoyi said, "The secluded path of the Heavenly Fox? Isn't that the name of the exterior? What do you mean?" Wen Ji explained, "The hometown of the Heavenly Fox clan is the secluded path of the Heavenly Fox clan. It was the name of the exterior before they were detained. But after they went to the exterior, they called the location of the exterior as the secluded path of the Heavenly Fox clan because they missed their hometown. It was not their hometown, but a prison. I'll tell you the location of the secluded path of the real main world later, but you have to be careful. That place has strange astronomical phenomena, and there are many illusions, which is in line with the habits of the Heavenly Fox clan. But after millions of years, countless changes have happened. The changes in the astronomical phenomena of the universe are especially great, so now it's a dangerous place. Not to mention human cultivators, even the Heavenly Fox clan may not be able to get out of there. So, whether you want to take this road or not, you have to make your own decision. Or wait until you have a chance to go to the exterior and think of a way at the secluded path of the Heavenly Fox clan. When you went to the exterior, I told you to go there and have fun, but you didn't listen." Lu Xiaoyi was very dissatisfied. "You didn't tell me clearly. If you take a detour, who knows where your intestines go? And do you think I'm a kind of person who likes to indulge in pleasure when I'm doing business? What does it mean that the secluded path of the Heavenly Fox clan in the main world is very dangerous? A strong opponent? Or an illusion to examine one's heart? Or something else?" Wen Ji snorted. "In that place, your only opponent is yourself. It's the journey of testimony. The more thoughts you have, the more troublesome it is. The more innocent you are, the easier it is to get out. Like you, I think it's very difficult to get out after you go in. You'll become fertilizer for the astronomical phenomena. Or more accurately, you'll become a story to test the cultivators in the illusion of the secluded path, the story of the swordsman. Lu Xiaoyi understood. You mean if I get lost in there and can't get out, I'll become a story material in the illusion of the Heavenly Fox clan? Then I'll continue to act there and become a scene to test the latecomers? Wen Ji smiled. You're not stupid. That's about it. I'll act out the drama of your life for free. I guarantee that it'll be authentic and not exaggerated. Chapter 2024. Lu Xiaoyi began to understand. This was one of the most famous celestial phenomena in the universe. It was not like most celestial phenomena, which were surging, violent, or quiet. Instead, it was a kind of celestial phenomenon that could affect or control the mind. It was not unique in the universe, but most of them were small in scale. It was a single, small spiritual, celestial phenomenon. In the universe, the environmental conditions for spiritual, celestial phenomena to exist were extremely strict. Therefore, they could not be as earth-shattering as those black holes, giant stars, and bright clouds. Most of them could only appear in a certain environment, and their influence was limited. A large-scale psychic astronomical union, like the Forest Fox Hidden Path, was extremely rare in the universe. At the very least, Lu Xiaoyi had never heard of it before. It was hard to say if it was the only one, but to say it was as rare as phoenix feathers and Qilin horns was very appropriate. Only in such a large-scale spiritual celestial phenomenon could a special race like the Heavenly Fox be born. It was a relationship of mutual dependence. In other words, the Immortal Court did agree to the Crow ancestors' request to release the Heavenly Fox clan back to freedom and return to the main world. However, in the process of implementation, the Heavenly Fox clan was not allowed to return to their real homeland. Instead, they were sent to the Wuchou Road. If the Crow ancestor was still alive, there was no doubt that he would stir up trouble in the Immortal Court and would not give up until he achieved his goal. Unfortunately, he left so quickly that he did not have time to wipe his butt clean. It meant that he had only done half the thing. The Heavenly Fox clan did leave the cage of the exterior realm and return to the main world that they yearned for day and night. However, they did not get freedom. They were only transferred to prison. The Immortal Court must have its own considerations for doing so. With the mistakes that the Heavenly Fox clan had made millions of years ago, they still had a long way to go before they could fully gain the trust of the entire cultivation world. When these past events were inadvertently uncovered, other than faint anger, there was a deep sense of powerlessness left. This was the helplessness in the face of the entire system. You did not even know who to find to vent your anger. Of course, this was also what Lu Xiaoyi had been planning in secret. He was not the Crow ancestor and was not so carefree. However, he must do what he wanted to do. He had to live, enjoy the fruits of his efforts. Therefore, he chose to forget those two memories. He did not want to follow in Li Wuya's footsteps. He didn't like tragedies. He liked the perfect ending. He liked the people close to him to be there and do what they should do. Then, from then on, he and his senior sisters lived a peaceful and beautiful life. You just told me that the Heavenly Fox might be related to the heart plate? Although I don't know much about the exterior, in terms of pure technical ability, the Celestial Fox clan does have such ability. So your news may not be groundless. I will not comment on whether the Heavenly Fox clan is involved in this matter, but I want to remind you that the Heavenly Fox clan was released by Li Wuya. Your Sword Vane and Xin Yuan naturally have to bear some responsibility for their actions. Have you noticed that in the world of cultivation, the higher you go, the more you have to pay attention to the correctness of cultivation? You can do nothing. This is in line with the idea of governing by doing nothing. But once you do it, you have to bear the consequences. You want to go to Wuchou Road. Your train of thought is correct. This matter is not that dispensable. It is insignificant. You think it doesn't matter, but in the future, it may become an obstacle to the Sword Vane's future status in the future. If it is really related to the Heavenly Fox clan, don't cover up, you have to cut the Gordian knot. If it is not related, you have to ask for an explanation and restore the reputation of the Heavenly Fox clan in the exterior realm, in the entire half-immortal realm. He looked at Lu Xiaoyi. Actually, you asked me these questions because you have already thought about it, right? If it wasn't for the great impact of this matter, I wouldn't be bothered to talk to you about it. Lu Xiaoyi sighed his heart. This old man was a treasure, but he was full of nonsense. It was not his view of things, but his concealment of himself. What kind of experience did he have to go through to make an old man of vital spirit understand so much? Don't worry, the truth will come out sooner or later. The era is about to change. No one can escape. Senior, I also have a vague idea about the Heavenly Fox clan. In fact, I'm not sure. I also have the intention to go if it is convenient, but if it is not convenient, then forget it. Then I don't understand. If the Heavenly Fox clan is really related to the heart plate, why would it affect the sword vein so much? No matter what, it is not the sword vein's problem, but a joint responsibility, right? Wen Ji shook his head, no. According to the rules of the cultivation world, Li Wuya is the guarantor when the Heavenly Fox clan descends to the lower realm. Now that Li Wuya is no longer here, the matter naturally falls to you, Xin Yuan, to take care of it. Is there a problem? Of course, in the first place, such a thing could happen to anyone. It is not rare. If it was the cultivation era, there would be no need to care at all. It was a clean background. If it was indirectly related, Taoism and Buddhism should have been disbanded a long time ago, because the crimes related to them are simply too numerous to count. But now is a special time. The universe is in chaos. The era is changing. And the most terrible thing is that the sword vein still wants to do something. Especially you, Lu Xiaoyi. If you don't care about the sword vein's future, and if you don't care about your position in the future, then of course all of this doesn't matter. Like Li Wuya, you can kill whoever you want. If you are unhappy, the sword vein has always been good at this. But are you like this? If you don't want to be like Li Wuya, you have to pay attention to this matter. Wen Ji exhaled a smoke ring skillfully. I heard that the half-immortals in the exterior realm like to hold Dharma conferences the most. Is that true? Lu Xiaoyi nodded. It is not like it is obsession. It is to the extent of perversion. Wen Ji closed his eyes and tried to control himself not to reveal too much. This kid was too sharp. He had to say it, and he could not say it directly. It was difficult to grasp the propriety, and it was very difficult for him. And the most terrible thing was that he originally wanted to be a bystander, watching the show, and casually come up with a few bad ideas to satisfy his craving. But he did not expect to fall deeper and deeper into it. He was also very clear that this information was not something an ordinary vital spirit cultivator could know. But now, he could not care so much because he was already immersed in this process. Participating was much more exciting than watching the show from the sidelines. He told himself that not interfering was the bottom line. As for the loopholes in his words, it was no longer important. He was different from Hai and was a genuine immortal and also belonged to the all-seeing system. For an innate spiritual treasure, there were many ways to retreat, and he was confident that he could survive this tribulation. But he was only a man immortal. All these years, he had been fooling around below, happily participating in the affairs of humans. This was not in accordance with the rules of an innate spiritual treasure. The most important thing was that he was not in the system. As an immortal treasure, he naturally had a premonition. Last time, he was blindly involved in the incident with Li Wuya. This time, it was Lu Xiaoyi. Based on his intuition, he knew that his outcome would not be good. Since he had already lost the favor of the heavens, what else was there to worry about? Even if he did not stir the shit himself, he could at least pass a manure fork, right? Chapter 2025. It's hard to accept the habit of holding a Dharma assembly in the exterior realm. There's a limit to everything. Going too far is as bad as falling short. The cultivators of the main world also liked to hold Dharma conferences, but in terms of frequency and scale, they were far inferior to those of the exterior. The Dharma conferences of the main world were also completely different in terms of content and substance. The Dharma conferences of the main world were more purposeful. They were for the purpose of preaching Tao and resolving disputes. However, what was the purpose of the exterior heavenly half-immortals holding a Dharma conference like this? Their Tao techniques have already reached a considerable height, and they place more emphasis on personal comprehension. It's already very difficult for them to obtain their own things from the achievements of others. Occasional exchanges are understandable, but excessive dharmic gathering makes one have no choice but to suspect the purpose behind it. When Ji paused for a moment, he felt that he still needed to use himself as a shield. It was not good to be too naked. I have a half-immortal friend who once mentioned to me that the exterior heavenly confinement is headed by Fa Hui. What did he mean? It was this kind of Dharma assembly that appeared to be fighting for the rankings in the Jade Book and the qualifications to ascend to immortality. However, its core content was to express one's loyalty, to clarify one's attitude, and to unify one's cognition and thoughts. If one wanted to join the big family of the immortal world, there were countless conditions to meet. Strength was not the most important. There were many mighty figures in the immortal court. There were countless true immortals and dozens of golden immortals. How powerful would one need to be? No matter how strong you are, can you defeat them? Attitude, sociability, conformity, and the ability to truly integrate with the immortal court were the most important qualities. There was no other way to examine these things. They could only be carefully screened and nurtured over the long years of the exterior masters. The purpose was to not let a shitstir ruin everyone's life and cultivation. For example, Yurli Wuya accidentally allowed this guy to take advantage of a loophole. The result was chaos in the universe, the collapse of the great Tao, and the restart of the epic. It was Lu Xiaoyi's first time hearing this kind of argument. It was very novel, but it also had a deep meaning. It was hard to imagine how a half-immortal friend of an ordinary supreme's primordial spirit could have such knowledge. However, he had heard it many times from the old Taoist, so he was not surprised. This was also very good. The old Taoist was talking so much that his tail was leaking more and more, and he didn't even know it. Perhaps he knew and did it on purpose. All he needed to do was to start a conversation. It was strange that a person who had never been to the exterior was talking about the exterior with someone who was qualified and had been there. However, both of them deliberately avoided talking about it. That makes sense. I've been there once, but because I had a mission, I was in a hurry, so I didn't have a deep understanding of it. I understand what you mean. The exterior realm is the preparation of the immortals, and the Dharma conference is the tool to unify people's thoughts and cognition. Through the Dharma conference, you can change, or you can say, discover your ideological tendencies and behavioral characteristics. In the end, he would pick out the most obedient, the ones who never caused trouble, the ones who were submissive, and the ones who posed the least threat to the current order. They were the real seeds of immortal ascension, and the others were just foils. From the looks of it, those who had hidden grievances in their hearts, such as the sword vein and the body vein, had no chance at all. How heartless must this person be to remain indifferent to the misfortune of his unorthodox orthodoxy throughout his long cultivation journey? Wen Ji smiled bitterly. Exactly. In fact, in the immortal court, there were also various Dharma gatherings. Why? Why would he need to learn other people's Tao when he had already become an immortal? Could be changed? It was still the same. The purpose was obvious without asking. It was also to unify people's thinking and cognition. Because thinking could change, it was necessary to gather everyone in one direction at all times and build on the basis of benefits. If the superior had something good, the inferior would have to follow. Therefore, this Dharma gatherings had already changed once one reached the half-immortal level. Instead, it was better for the cultivators of the origin world to explore the purity of nature in order to strengthen themselves. Lu Xiaoyi sighed. The class of vested interests regardless of whether it was an immortal or a mortal, are all the same. Junior will tell you the truth. Being too conservative is not conducive to the development of the cultivation world, because there is no way to progress. Once there is a hindrance, it will accumulate over time and become a hidden danger. Now that the heavenly Tao has tacitly approved the restart of the era, there may be such a reason, but too many changes will cause the cultivation world of the universe to continue to be turbulent, and war will continue to break out and smoke will rise everywhere. There has to be a limit that is conducive to development and can also maintain stability. Wenji looked at the little guy in front of him in surprise. He felt that something had been touched in the dark. This was a perception unique to immortals, because at this moment, he suddenly realized that his originally dim future seemed to have revealed a trace of light. His future destiny had changed. In this world, there was nothing but the heavenly Tao that could affect the destiny of an immortal. Even Zenith Heaven Golden Immortals could not do it. Perhaps it also did not have the mood to do this. The reason was very simple. Because in his heart, he still approved of this guy's argument. Because he approved, the heavenly Tao opened a small gap for him. Whether or not he could walk out of this gap in the future would depend on his future performance. This was an extremely good change because it opened the door of hope. And all of this came from this famous shit stirrer in the origin world. Then, did this mean that the heavenly Tao needed someone to come out and stir things up in a certain period of time under certain circumstances? When Ji was excited, he had always thought that he was this little guy's thigh, or at least one of his thighs. But now it was hard to say who was whose thigh. He had to hold on. This time, his participation and brainless behavior, which was ridiculed by Lord Linglong, had brought him a ray of hope. This was something he had never expected. He stabilized his emotions. Rhythm. He had to control the rhythm well. The direction was right, and all that was left was to not advance rashly. Going too far was as bad as not going far enough. He could not play a good hand, especially this trump card in front of him. My friend's view on the role of the spiritual assembly is very unique. Of course, my judgment is only for reference. You still have to think about it yourself. What I'm going to talk about next is the content of the spiritual assembly. Since it's not a preaching of the Tao, what should I say? What should I say? My friend once mentioned that it's actually about everyone's past, achievements, and mistakes. There's also self-destruction and others digging into it. Your mistakes when you're in the foundation establishment, Gene, Dan, don't matter. But when you're in the higher realms and still have problems, you'll attract the condemnation of others, especially for a new orthodoxy. If you want to rise, you have to withstand the criticism of others. On this point, your Xianyuan will be seen as the most important. Even the slightest mistake will be magnified infinitely. Who asked you to want to make a difference? Li Wuya had caused countless troubles. Actually, his killing before becoming an immortal was not that important. What was important were his actions after becoming an immortal. People would see his actions as an important factor in determining whether the sword vein had the qualifications to become an immortal. After becoming an immortal, Li Wuya did 3 things: feeding the sky, releasing the heavenly fox, and Dao Da. Chapter 2026. Of the 3 things, descending to the mortal world was the most significant. No one dared to say whether it was good or bad, but in general, the immortal court certainly thought that it was a bad behavior that broke the order. But in the main world, everyone was happy. There was no doubt that feeding Qin Kong was a common behavior in the process of cultivators becoming immortals. Therefore, the only thing that could be used against Li Wuya and the sword vein was to let the heavenly foxes descend to the mortal world. In the big environment of pursuing the right path of cultivation, this might be considered an irresponsible behavior. As immortals, they should not let their emotions affect their decisions and cause harm to the mortal world. This kind of mistake was meaningless to those who did not pursue it. But if one wanted to be a leader, this would be a stain on history. That was roughly what it meant. To become an immortal, one had to consider all aspects. Of course, the problem of the heavenly foxes would not be brought up in the past few hundred years. But when it was the most critical time, someone would definitely bring it up again. This was the reason why Lu Xiaoyi decided to make this trip. The forest fox path is actually a good place for cultivation. Cultivating here is most suitable for cultivators to integrate their essence, qi, and spirit into one. It is also an important step to becoming a yang spirit. I think your past, present, and future have just been decided. It's time to go up. Lu Xiaoyi was not in a hurry. He stayed in the dome for nearly a month, and once again made a comprehensive understanding of the upper realm of yang spirit. He was very clear that this trip was probably an opportunity to solve his lack of cultivation. Whether it was the road of no return or the road of no worry, hope would become his path to the upper realm. The dome was unusually quiet now, especially at the high-level level. The supreme level and above all went out to look for their own opportunities. How many years did he have? If he did not fight now, when would he? Almost all of his friends were not there because this group of people was also the most competitive group of Xianyuan swordsmen. The universe and the world of cultivators walked forward with the sky on their backs. This was the fate and mission of this generation of cultivators. No one knew what kind of answer he could give. In the dome, he did not have an immortal's cave because after Jin Dan, he went to Zhou Xian. After that, he did not have a home. As the sect leader, he treated the main hall as his home. In fact, it was not much to him. Up until now, he was still the head of the Xianyuan sword sect in name, but in reality, Guandu Guanshan was in charge of all his trivial matters. This was the last support that the older generation of swordsmen gave to the younger generation. They had to guard their hometown well and give a younger generation a more relaxed environment for cultivation. They didn't need to stay at the dome for some trivial matters. Lu Xiaoyi was very grateful for this. This was the most ordinary way, but also the most meaningful support. Not only Lu Xiaoyi, but also Yin Sheng and those swordsman-perfected monarchs who were running around the universe. The truth was that the old yang spirits on the dome, especially Guandu and Guanshan, were running out of time. If a sect or a force wanted to stand out in this turbulent era, it couldn't do without the hard work of everyone. If someone was glorious in front of others, there would also be people who worked hard behind the scenes. You couldn't say who was more important. It was a whole. The important situation was not only in Xianyuan, but also in all the big sects and forces on the fifth ring. They left the opportunity to the younger generation because they had more time, more drive, and were the younger generation. They were also the future. Lu Xiaoyi was not in a hurry to set out. His character had determined that he would carefully weigh the pros and cons before he did anything, no matter how big or small. Recently, he had received a lot of subversive news. He needed to find out the truth from the detailed information and choose the path that was closest to success for himself. Coming and going freely was the patent and label of a person like Crow Ancestor. He could not do it. Not only did he have to be cool, but he also had to pretend to be cool. He also had to achieve his goal and take care of his sect and friends. It would be very tiring, but he hoped that after the change of era, the situation would be fixed. Later generations would evaluate him as a competent shit-stirrer, very professional. There was also his own cultivation. After solidifying his foundation of the upper realm, in addition to his tireless pursuit of the Tao state, he began to make a breakthrough in the sword bundle. After taking a big detour, he came back again. Actually, researching the Tao state and swordsmanship did not conflict. It was a process of helping each other. Crow Ancestor's most powerful swordsmanship was the celestial swordsmanship, but in fact, Lu Xiaoyi thought that Crow Ancestor's strength had surpassed the so-called most powerful swordsmanship. It was just a casual strike and could no longer be measured by a framework. He did not have the opportunity to explore the celestial phenomenon like Crow Ancestor. He positioned the highest system of his swordsmanship as the combination of the Tao state. This was what he was best at. Even Crow Ancestor was not as good as him. Starting from the current 10 Tao state, through the free combination of several Tao state to form a new effect, it was actually a new ability of the Tao state. He had been researching this for hundreds of years. Since the collision of the inner and outer Jingtian outside the Hengi region, he suddenly accelerated his research. This was because he had realized that almost all the half-immortals were working hard in this area. It was actually the most effective and most suitable research direction for the current cultivation environment. On this point, others were not slower than him, but others did not have such a broad foundation of the Tao state like him. If they did not know how to make use of it, then they were really cultivating for nothing. Why are you still here? Wenji was a little impatient. This guy had been coming to ask for news every 2 to 3 days recently, which made him very distressed. It was not that he did not have any new information, but he had to work very hard to judge what to say and what not to say. Lu Xiaoyi said carelessly, "What's the hurry? It's going to be a long journey. Let me enjoy my ordinary life." In Lu Xiaoyi's opinion, the more impatient the old Taoist was, the more likely he was to reveal more information to send him away. But when Ji saw through his thoughts and began to close the door and decline visitors, flying slowly in the sky above the dome, he swept through the familiar places. He had a premonition that he would not be able to come back for a long time. The scattered grievances of the main world would be completely cut off from him. He should not set his sights on the world below anymore. His divine sense swept through the ice river and the snow-covered cave house beside the ice river when he first came to the dome. The choice at that time was really childish, but this was the price of growth. He flew very low, like a snow falcon looking for food. He flew very slowly, and only when he left could he feel a faint sense of reluctance. This was a farewell to the dome, and also a farewell to his past. A foundation establishment cultivator came out of the cave house, looking very dissatisfied. Lu Xiaoyi certainly had the right to keep this place forever, but he did not do so. He did not need to leave a place for people to pay homage to, because he did not want to die and did not want to become a thing of the past. The cultivator could not tell his level at all, and only thought that he was a fellow disciple passing by. He complained loudly. "They told me that this was Lu Zhu's cave house. Is it possible? It's like a place of self-exile. Either they are lying to me, or Lu Zhu is sick." Lu Xiaoyi chuckled. "You're right, he is indeed sick." Well, unknowingly, he became an ancestor. Chapter 2027. Lu Xiaoyi silently rose higher and higher, disappearing from the dome in an instant. A group of Yuaniing cultivators were on their way back, but they could not see clearly what it was. All they saw was a ray of clear light shooting up into the sky. In the blink of an eye, they could not feel anything. In fact, their six senses did not even catch this ray of clear light. The clear light flashed and disappeared as if this memory was about to disappear. They could not help but look at each other in shock. They knew that this was a top 5th ring cultivator passing by, making them yearn for it. This time, Lu Xiaoyi did not hesitate and kept going up. When he opened his third eye, he purely used his consciousness to observe this universe. He placed his spirit far away. In an unknown place far away, 2 bright lights beckoned to him. Faint spatial fluctuations appeared. It was not in the main world, but it was not in the main world. One was the familiar interior realm, and the other was the unfamiliar exterior realm. He climbed towards the unfamiliar light. It was an indescribable place. Any cultivator in the Blight realm would be able to feel it as long as they reached a certain realm. No matter which universe they were in, this place seemed to be hanging above their heads. Its wonders were indescribable and made people feel fearful. It was also his first time looking at this place from the main world's point of view. In fact, he was not sure if he had the qualifications to enter. But since he could feel it, he should be able to enter, right? Gradually, in the main world's vision, his whole body gradually became blurry. His body became unstable under the penetration of the cosmic rays, but there were no spatial anomalies beyond the scope of understanding. This was something beyond the normal understanding of cultivators in the main world. If you could see it, you could see it. If you cannot see it, you would never understand it. This was a world that belonged to half-immortals. He was actually not very interested in this world. Whether it was the immortals of the interior realm or the Dharma conference of the exterior realm, he felt that this was a place that restricted the freedom of cultivators. He did not need to learn how to become an immortal. That was not his immortal. He also did not need to hold a Dharma conference to improve his ranking. That was not his name. It was just the needs of the immortal court. He was still not strong enough. As he continued to pull, he felt as if the thin film was being shattered one by one. He had experienced this feeling many times. This should be the so-called limit of the number of layers of heaven, right? Mortals said that there were 9 levels of heaven. The first was Zhong heaven, the second was Xian heaven, the third was Tsong heaven, the fourth was Gung heaven, the fifth was Tian heaven, the sixth was Qua heaven, the seventh was Xian heaven, the eighth was Shun heaven, and the ninth was Chung heaven. How could the Tao sect's definition of heaven be so shallow? Is it limited to the height in the physical sense? Then it would definitely be illusory and indistinct, something that only existed in the heart. Otherwise, it wouldn't be able to display its profoundness, wouldn't be able to reflect the immortal realm. In the Tao realm, the Tao sect's definition of heaven was actually 36 days. The previous days were all idealistic, just to make up the numbers to show the profundity of the heavenly Tao. Only the last 4 days were truly meaningful. The 33rd level of the Grand Pure Realm, Great Scarlet Heaven, the 34th level of the Grand Pure Realm, Yu Heaven, and the 35th level of the Jade Pure Realm, Qingwei Heaven. These 3 heavens were known as the 3 clear heavens. 36 days was the highest level, known as the Daoyuo Heaven. Together with the 3 pure realms, they were known as the 4 heavens of the Sage Realm. Human immortals were active in Dachi Heaven. True immortals were in Yu Heaven, and golden immortals were in Qingwei Heaven. The Daoyuo golden immortals were in the highest Daoyuo Heaven. In fact, it was like a court in the mortal world in the form of stairs. Based on your ability, you had to occupy that position. Levels were everywhere. In the 36 heavens, the Desire Realm, Color Realm, and Colorless Realm were known as the 3 realms. There were a total of 28 heavens. Above the 3 realms, there were 4 Brahma heavens, and above that were the 4 sacred heavens. The 3 realms, 4 Brahma heavens, and 4 heavens of the Sage Realm were a total of 36 heavens. This was the Tao sect's distinction of the Tao realm. The Desire Realm, Color Realm, and Colorless Realm were known as the 3 realms. The so-called jumping out of the 3 realms in the Tao sect actually meant that people were above the 28 heavens, not under the control of the celestial empire. In the Tao sect's theory, the relationship between the 5 elements and the heavens was profound. The Tao sect's 9, minus the 5 of the 5 elements, there were 4. 5 and 4 complemented each other, 40 to 50%. 4 referring to the 4 Brahma heavens. Not being in the 5 elements meant that one had surpassed the 4 Brahma heavens and reached the level of at least the 4 heavens of the Sage Realm, which was above the 33 heavens. Therefore, jumping out of the 3 realms and not being in the 5 elements referred to ascending the 33 heavens and becoming a man immortal. The past, present, and future were united, and all space-time were united. One could prove immortality and become eternal. Of course, Lu Xiaoyi couldn't climb up to the 33 heavens now. He had just beheaded a corpse. He hadn't even jumped out of the 3 realms, not to mention not being in the 5 elements. His question was, if he didn't talk about the exterior realm, how many levels of heaven could he climb? To him, the 28 heavens was the ceiling. He couldn't cross this threshold, considering that he was a semi-defective product. If he were to discount it a little, perhaps it would be the 27 heavens Han, Chong Miao, Chung Heaven, or even the 26 heavenly Yuan Tongyuan cave world. According to the method Tinxi taught him, the closer he was to the exterior realm, the more accurate he could pinpoint the airspace he wanted to go to. However, the disadvantage was that it was more likely that he would be detected by the exterior immortal monarch. Accuracy and not being detected were destined to be irreconcilable. However, he didn't have to worry too much about this for now. This was because to complete the transit of the exterior realm, he had to be close to the 26 heavens at least. This was the bottom line. The exterior realm was in the 26 heavenly Yuan, Tanyuan cave world. Then, there was Old Taoist Wen Ji's unreliable star map. If he wanted to shift his position accurately, he had to have an accurate star map of the target location. It was best if he had been there before. Then he could have a better grasp of it. How could he have been to the forest fox path? Therefore, Old Taoist Wen Ji had prepared a large-scale celestial phenomenon that was relatively close to the forest fox path. This was relatively close. Under Lu Xiaoyi's repeated questioning, Old Taoist Wen Ji finally stuttered and said that it was only about 10 universes away. The key was that it was a star map from thousands of years ago. There was no other way. He could only make do with it. Now, in the process of pulling up, he felt the barrier breaking and the membrane tearing apart. It was as if he had broken through layers of heavens by force. This feeling had already happened more than 10 times, and it was still continuing. The exterior realm was getting clearer and clearer in his senses. There were fewer and fewer membranes between them. When there was only one membrane left, it meant that he had arrived at the 25th heavens, the Howding Heaven. He couldn't go any higher. If he went any higher, he would enter the 26th heavens, which was the exterior realm. It was hard to say if he could come out easily. He didn't want to try. He stopped and silently operated his skills. A vast starry sky appeared in front of him. He searched with difficulty, looking for the place where Old Taoist Wen Ji's star map kissed and reconciled. He still had this kind of experience. He had done this when he was in the interior realm, so he was not unfamiliar with it. Thankfully, there was nothing wrong with Old Taoist Wen Ji's star map. The very special celestial phenomenon was still there and had not disappeared with the changes of the universe. After confirming that there was no mistake, Lu Xiaoyi did not hesitate. He lifted his body and crashed down in the direction it was heading. Chapter 2028. P.S. My mind has been a little numb recently. My inspiration is not there, so it's very difficult to write. I'm working hard to overcome it. So, please forgive those who are dissatisfied and feel that it's too dull. I'm about to come into contact with the immortal court. There are too many things to consider. My mind is in a mess. When Lu Xiaoyi felt that he had returned to the void of the main world, everything around him was very unfamiliar to him. Of course, it was very unfamiliar because this was the southern elephant sky, the four elephants of a universe. The eastern azure dragon was dominated by human Taoists. The western white tiger was controlled by Buddhists. The northern black tortoise was controlled by numinous treasure, and the southern vermilion bird was the gathering place of demonic beasts. There was a reason why the heavenly fox's birthplace was located here. The southern elephant sky was a brand new world to him. But as a wanderer in the universe, there was no place that he did not dare to explore. Wasn't it just a dozen or so universes? His adventures in Jindan were much further than this. This was an unusually bright star. It was in the most glorious stage of its burning, so Lu Xiaoyi could find it relatively easily. He had to admit that when Ji knew very well what kind of astrology was the most helpful to travelers. This old man hid his abilities well. Taking out the old star map and comparing it carefully to determine the route was a piece of cake for him. In the surrounding space, other than this burning star, there were no traces of living creatures. Not to mention humans and demonic beasts, there was not even a single void beast. Then, he moved like a ray of light. This distance required him to cross a dozen or so universes. When he was in Yuanying, it would probably take him 500 years. 100 years for a perfected Lord in spirit. 50 years was enough for an immortal soul stage. Now that he was in the first stage of the immortal soul stage, he could control the time within 20 years. Although he was still a little dissatisfied, that was a problem caused by using the inner and outer scenic heavens. But in the current environment, it was also a cultivation journey. He liked to fly and think at the same time. There were too many things to consider carefully. He listed his understanding of the Tao realm in a table, trying to find the most perfect combination. The ones that he had fully comprehended and mastered were the pre-celestial 5 manifestations: fate, virtue, merit, void, slaughter, impermanence, chaos, 5 elements, and space. Some of the comprehensions that were relatively deep and would be able to reach a higher level as soon as the fragments of the Great Tao arrived were no need, reincarnation, karma, power, origin, nirvana, life and death, lightning, yin and yang, destruction, and nirvana. There were 11 of them altogether. Still in the rudimentary state, there was still a lot of room for improvement. Misfortune, inheritance, destiny, interception, nether virtue, blessing, saint virtue, time, creation, nihility, and return to one. There were as many as 11 of them. As he continued to rearrange the innate Taos, Zhongyu had a feeling that if there were any changes to the innate Taos in the future, it would most likely be in the 3 innate Taos. The pre-celestial 5 luck, pre-celestial 5 grands, and pre-celestial 5 virtues. Simply put, the connate 5 destinies could merge into the Tao of destiny. The 5 ties of post-celestial might be reduced to 1 ties. As for what it should be called, he would have to think about it later. If it was up to him to choose, he would choose ties. When the connate 5 virtues finally merged into one, it would be the existence of morality. This wasn't just a random thought. It was a thought that came to Zhongyu after he had fully comprehended the pre-celestial 5 manifestations. The universe had been formed for too long, and after the change of era, there were some things that didn't need to be separated so clearly anymore. They could be simplified and merged together to better adapt to the universe's cultivation environment after the change of era. Nothing was immutable. Only change was eternal. Even the innate Taos had to adapt to the trend of the times. Every cultivation era had its own characteristics. The change this time would not be the final change. Perhaps there would be more changes when the next era changed millions of years later. Perhaps it would continue to innovate and bring forth new things, or perhaps it would return to the ancient times. The pre-celestial 5 manifestations were like that, but whether or not the 5 virtues and 5 destinies would be the same remained to be seen. From this, Zhongyu guessed that the innate Taos that were more homogeneous would merge together and not be separated into Taoism and Buddhism. For example, the slaughter, destruction, nirvana, life, death, and sin wheel. There was no need for these few Taos to exist at the same time. There were also things that could never be replaced in his philosophy. For example, morality, fate, chaos, time, space, the 5 elements, yin and yang, reincarnation, lightning, creation, strength, karma, impermanence, and nothing else. There were 14 of them. This was the general outline, and only when the Taos were combined under the correct framework would they have vitality and be immortal. It wouldn't mean that the foundation of your Taos would disappear after the change of era. There were 2 ways to restructure one's Taos. The first way was to choose the combination of the 14 Taos that he was sure would never be replaced, and the power obtained from this way would not be lost before or after the change of era. When the time came, it was destined that talking was useless, and everyone would start to act. Where would he have the time to study new Taos? The other way was to find new innate Taos among the Taos that he thought would be merged together. This was also the most promising way, because not only would he obtain new combat power, he would also become the new Taos Lord, or the Taos Lord. He was a reformist to get rid of the old and create the new. With his personality, how could he tolerate a new Taos that didn't involve him? Wasn't this the reason why he stirred up *T for thousands of years? Even if he couldn't create all new Taos, he should at least have a part of them, right? At least 1 or 2 of them, right? Otherwise, how would he be able to achieve his incomparably arrogant greater self? After hundreds of years of hard work, he already had some progress in this aspect. In the first way, he created 2 powerful combinations of Taos. One was the judgment of prophecy. The other was the space-time annihilation. The judgment of prophecy was stolen from someone else, and the space-time annihilation was the move that surrounded the stone anchor beast to the wall of mirrors. Back then, the blind old man's judgment of prophecy was based on the three innate Taos of fate interception, karma, and impermanence. He changed fate interception to fate interception and made some changes. It wasn't exactly plagiarism, because in the cultivation world, how could there be something that completely belonged to oneself? The space-time annihilation's power was hard to describe. It could be used to deal with those spiritual entities, but it was barely enough to deal with human cultivators. This was because he was at the peak of the space Tao, but he only dabbled in the time Tao. One leg was long, the other was short, and he was still a cripple. These were two that were already formed, and there were still a few that were not formed yet, and were still being studied. In the second way, he also had two gains. The star Tao. This was a new Tao state that he gradually formed after he had a complete understanding of the five Taos. The star Tao was not a new thing. It had been around for millions of years, but it had never been promoted to the innate Tao. When he first entered Xinyuan, he relied on the power of the star Tao, and it was also a coincidence. This star Tao was not the star Tao. It was a version of the celestial phenomenon that he developed by merging his understanding of the five Taos into the universe. The star Tao did not only refer to the stars that were formed, but it also included all the celestial phenomena in the universe. He was very confident in the star Tao. In this post-universe era, the five Taos were too old, and they were no longer suitable, especially before and after the change of eras. They needed a new celestial phenomenon to guide them. And that was the star Tao. P.S. I am about to create a new innate Tao. Old Sloth's brain power is limited, and he also has cognitive limitations, so it's inevitable that he would not consider everything thoroughly. This is my book, and it's also your book. If you have any good suggestions about the nomination of a new innate Tao, please leave a comment in this chapter. Thank you for your support. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.